Chapter 1448. When Feng Bujue was attacked by the Special Forces for the first time, he didn't think much of it. First, this was just a single-player scenario on normal difficulty, so the margin for error was very high. It was unlikely that there would be an opening kill that would kill you before you had a chance to gain a foothold. Second, with Feng Bujue's current equipment, the minions would have a hard time even injuring him, much less one-shot him. Therefore, when the bullets were fired at him, Feng Bujue just moved casually and made sure that his vitals weren't hit, so he dodged slightly. In the end, he still managed to dodge most of the bullets. Only 2 bullets hit him. One grazed his back, and the other pierced his calf. Then, Brother Ju didn't feel good. "I'm hurt. Blood. What happened to me?" That was his first reaction after he was shot. Just like what I said earlier, the 2 bullets hit him, and they both caused damage. Not only was there a graze, but there was also a piercing wound. With that, Feng Bujue didn't dare to be careless anymore. He immediately focused and confirmed the enemy's location and number through the bullet's trajectory and data. Then, he launched a swift counterattack. There weren't many people who ambushed him. There were 6 of them, and they were all in groups of 2. They were well-trained and well-armed. They were hiding 15 meters, 30 meters, and 100 meters away from Brother Ju. They were in different directions at different levels and behind different cover. Even though the defense was well arranged, as long as Feng Bujue was serious, it would be easy to take them out. He didn't even use a long-range weapon. He only relied on his high speed and simple close-range attacks, wrench hitting, to take care of the 6 Special Forces soldiers. However, this led to even more enemies. This time, there were 12 of them in 6 teams. They were spread out further than the previous 3 teams, but overall, they still surrounded Feng Bujue. Triangular honeycomb formation. While he was under siege, Feng Bujue realized the formation of the Special Forces soldiers. But just because he realized it, it didn't mean that he could break through it immediately. With the enemy's numbers and their tight defense, even if he knew the enemy's formation, he wouldn't be able to get out of this situation in a short amount of time. Thus, a game of First Blood in the jungle began. Everyone knew that First Blood was a story of one person beating a group of people. The situation before him was the same. A top player like Feng Bujue was definitely not someone who could be defeated by a group of mass-produced soldiers in a normal single-player dungeon. Even if they had a weapon that could injure Feng Bujue, it would be the same. It was like giving a baby a gun and asking him to kill an adult. As long as the adult was alert, it was almost impossible to succeed. 15 minutes later, Brother Ju had successfully taken out the 50 or so enemies that had surrounded him. Since the Special Forces soldiers had left their original positions to capture him, there was a large area in the jungle that was left unguarded. Using this gap, Feng Bujue successfully escaped from the enemy's line of sight and hid his tracks. Only then did he have time to deal with the wound on his calf that was shot through. Thankfully, I'm a player. If I get shot in the leg like that in the real world, I might even become a cripple, much less run. Feng Bujue used the bandages and first aid spray that he had taken from the Special Forces soldiers to quickly treat his wound. Then, he started to study the weapons of the Special Forces. Of course, he was curious. What kind of gun was able to penetrate his defense? Item name: Kila Assault Rifle. Item type: Weapon quality: Perfect attack. Extreme element: None special effect. There is nothing special about it, but it is very powerful. Equip requirement: Marksmanship C can be taken out of the scenario. No remark. This was originally a normal assault rifle, but after being enhanced by Jinkala, it has become several times stronger. Okay, not bad. The design is quite reasonable. After reading the item description, Feng Bujue was impressed. He gave it some thought. Since the technological level of this universe had reached the point where they could produce Jinkala at a temperature of 30,000 degrees, 5 times the temperature of the sun, then in terms of military technology, they could probably create mechanical freesia as well. Currently, they had only come up with some normal weapons that had been enhanced by Jinkala, and that was already very polite. Even though I'm here to practice my nunchaku, these guns are so convenient. It would be a waste not to use them. As Feng Bujue grumbled, he took out several Kila pistols from his inventory, stuffed them into his belt, and carried them on his back. Currently, he had plenty of space in his inventory, so he could pick up many things first. Therefore, during his earlier round, he had collected a bunch of rifles, pistols, grenades, ammo packs, medic packs, and so on. For normal difficulty, there were so many enemies, so it was only natural that he had plenty of supplies. Okay, after some preparation, Fong Bujue stood up and started the next step of his plan. He poked his head out from the bushes to look around before he crawled out from his hiding spot and sneaked toward the south. Earlier, when he was fighting with the SWAT soldiers, he had a rough idea of where they were going. Therefore, he deduced that his destination was to the south. If he had not been shot earlier, Fong Bujue would have most likely jumped into the air to confirm the location of the building. That way, he would be able to confirm his direction. But now he would not do that. He knew very well that a universe like this was similar to South Park. It was hard to predict what he would encounter here. If he jumped into the air and triggered a laser net, an automatic particle cannon, or a Kila missile, wouldn't that be asking for trouble? Therefore, Brother Ju still chose to take the ground route. He hid in the dark and moved slowly. If the situation allowed, he planned to capture someone alive to get more information. There was no harm in knowing more about the setting. At least, it would prevent him from failing miserably. Some might be curious. Fong Bujue had the data perspective. As long as he kept it active, he could have avoided all the sentries and traps along the way. So, why did he choose to move so slowly? The reason was simple. The data perspective was similar to the soul's that was maintained by mental power. It was very taxing on the mind. Even though the burden was not as heavy as Su Huaishang's Soul Advent, it was still there. Other than that, in an environment with complicated terrain and many sceneries, such as the jungle, using the data perspective would be more taxing on the mind. This special vision was not the clairvoyance that most people imagined. Instead, it was a way to observe the sequence of truth. After the data view was turned on, the first thing that Lucien saw was something like a matrix of numbers and magic runes. In a complex environment, these runes overlapped and affected each other, and it was easy to be dazzled. Therefore, even Fong Bujue would not keep the data perspective active. He would only use it when he needed it. To make a long story short, Brother Ju walked and stopped in the jungle for almost 20 minutes. During this time, he noticed a few teams of special forces. However, he did not go after them. This was because the special forces teams that he encountered were no longer two-man teams. They were five-man teams. It was obvious that Fong Bujue's previous actions had changed the defense strategy of the special forces. If the special forces that he encountered earlier were in sentry mode, then the special forces that he was facing now were in search and capture mode. TSK. Even the barricade has been set up. Finally, after walking for some distance, Fong Bujue saw a line of defense formed by soldiers in front of him. This was probably the line of defense that had just been set up to limit the scope of the search and capture. The ambush points of the soldiers were arranged in an arc, extending to the east and west. There was no end in sight. Although every two soldiers were more than 10 meters apart, it was impossible to pass through them without being discovered. Fong Bujue thought for a while. Why don't I just rush over? Most of their soldiers have been deployed to the north. Who knows, the back of the line of defense might be empty. Once I break through and hide in the dark again, it'll be hard for them to find me. His train of thought was interrupted. This was because he saw a person in front of him. It was a person with high data intensity. It was a middle-aged man with short hair. Unlike the special forces soldiers around him, he was wearing a black suit instead of a camouflage uniform. Although he was a little plump and did not look like he could fight very well, the data intensity would not lie. This guy was very strong. Just as Brother Ju was observing the man, to his surprise, the man's gaze locked onto Fong Bujue as well. After staring at him for 2 seconds, he scoffed and said, "This is truly a case of searching high and low only to find it by chance." As he spoke, the man took out a pistol from his waist and raised it to shoot. Fong Bujue was hiding in a low-lying area. There were shrubs above him and a rock in front of him. Moreover, there was a distance of more than 10 meters between him and the man. Logically speaking, even if the man's marksmanship was excellent, he would not be able to hit Brother Jew based on his position and the angle of the shot. However, he still fired and pulled the trigger without hesitation. This abnormality alerted Feng Bujue. Bang! At that moment, when the gunshot rang out, Brother Jew pushed against the ground, and his whole body flipped backward. Almost at the same time, the place where he was just now exploded. The explosion did not cover a large area, but the soil, rocks, and shrubs that were caught in the explosion were all turned into dust. So that's how it is. Feng Bujue, who had successfully dodged the attack, mumbled to himself. Even the minions are equipped with kilo weapons. Then, this thing that looks like a mini-boss is holding has to be a stronger version. Bang, bang, bang. Before he could gather his thoughts, 3 more shots were fired. The man did not intend to give him a chance to breathe. Chapter 1449. However, after the first shot, it would be difficult to hit Feng Bujue again. Since his whereabouts have been exposed, Brother Jew did not need to continue hiding. He could just hide in the open. With his current skills, if he was slightly more serious, he could escape from the sight of ordinary people. Even people with excellent dynamic vision would not be able to follow him. What? The next 3 shots unexpectedly missed. The middle-aged man's expression changed. It was obvious that Brother Jew's speed surprised him. While he was still in shock, Feng Bujue appeared in front of him in a flash and kicked the gun out of his hand. In the next second, Brother Jew turned around and appeared behind the middle-aged man like a ghost. He used his left hand to grab the man's shoulder and used his right hand to hold the Kila pistol to the back of the man's head. He said coldly, "Don't move." Feng Bujue's tone when he said these 2 words was equivalent to telling the man, "If you move once, I will shoot." Huh! Unexpectedly, the middle-aged man heard this and sneered. "Do you think a mere pistol can hurt me, Liang Fifan?" Before he finished speaking, an ice-cold inner strength exploded from the surface of his body, causing even the surrounding air to turn cold. Thankfully, Brother Jew was prepared. He knew that this mini-boss was not to be underestimated. It was definitely not just because it had a unique weapon. Therefore, he also escaped from the attack range of the boss' internal energy and retreated several feet away. With this retreat, he pulled away from Liang Fifan. The special forces on both sides saw this and immediately raised their weapons. In the blink of an eye, they formed an arc formation and opened fire. "Put away your guns." Just as the special forces were about to open fire, Liang Fifan suddenly raised his hand and ordered them to stop. He then looked at Brother Jew and said, "This person, I will deal with him personally." Ho! Feng Bujue narrowed his eyes at him. "You are quite confident." Liang Fifan's confidence came from his underestimation of his opponent's ability. After the short exchange, Liang Fifan's judgment of Feng Bujue was, "This person is very fast. If he runs with all his strength, not to mention bullets, it would not be difficult for him to escape the forest. However, his combat ability is very average. After all, he did not even dare to take the impact of my internal force." Thinking of this, Liang Fifan naturally stopped the special forces from opening fire. Bullets were not very effective against this target. If he was forced to escape, wouldn't that be giving away the credit for nothing? Confident. 2 seconds later, Liang Fifan looked back at Brother Jew with contempt and said, "You are the one who is confident." As he said this, he loosened his tie. "Compared to us real masters who use the golden nitrogen pill to improve our skills, the foundation of your martial arts is thousands of miles away. Although your Qinggong seems to be quite good, but just based on Qinggong, you want to cause trouble in our sacred land, I'm afraid you are too naive, right?" Hey. Feng Bujue listened to his opponent's words and complained in his heart. What is with martial arts? What the hell is martial arts? That weird script introduction forced me to speculate. It is indeed possible to speculate that this world has a very strong technology, but this kind of dialogue seems to imply that this is also a martial arts world at the same time. What is it trying to do? What? Seeing Brother Jew's eyes wandering and thinking, Liang Fifan thought his plan worked, and his face became even more proud. Now you know fear. Unexpectedly, in less than a second, Feng Bujue really nodded and replied expressionlessly, "Yes, I am." Not to mention that this guy did not know fear. Even if he did, his expression at this moment was not convincing at all. How about this? Fong Bujue did not wait for his opponent to respond and continued. I will go with you and tell you everything I know. Brother Fifan, you will be merciful and let me live. Liang Fifan was also stunned. He did not expect this guy in front of him to be so tactful and actually very consciously said the conditions that he was prepared to propose. Liang Fifan had no reason to reject this proposal because capturing the intruder alive and extracting information from him was obviously more important than killing the target. Okay. Liang Fifan hesitated for 2 seconds and ordered the soldiers on both sides. What are you waiting for? Arrest him. This matter was progressing so smoothly that Liang Fifan felt that it was unreal. In less than 10 seconds, 2 Special Forces soldiers came forward to search Fong Bujue's body and put on the Killa handcuffs. Throughout the whole process, Brother Ju did not show any signs of resistance. He was very cooperative with the Special Forces. Then, they escorted Fong Bujue to the headquarters building. 2 minutes later, Liang Fifan, who was walking on the way, took out his communicator and reported the matter to Count William directly. He also bragged about his glorious achievements and described himself as brilliant and magnificent, as if he were a divine soldier who had descended from the sky. At this time, he did not know that he had already been affected by the friend's mask. Fong Bujue, who was being escorted, approached his destination in a way that was faster than his own movement. In less than 20 minutes, he saw the building of the San Diego International Agricultural Group headquarters in America. This place was covered by forests and towering buildings. It was easy to defend and difficult to attack. When he was near the building, Fong Bujue saw a man in a tan suit from afar. His data strength was slightly higher than Liang Fifan's. That was Lu Xing. He had been waiting there for a while. When he saw Liang Fifan's smug face, Lu Xing could not help but show a hint of displeasure. However, he did not say anything to Liang Fifan. He waited there as if he wanted to see what the intruder looked like. After he confirmed, he left. Pretentious. Liang Fifan looked at the man's back from afar and spat viciously. Fong Bujue saw all of this. Although he did not know about the grudge between Liang Fifan and Lu Xing, and he was not interested in it, he still remembered the plot information in case he needed it. Soon, Brother Ju was brought into the headquarters building of the San Diego International Agricultural Group. At that moment, the system notification came, current mission completed. Main mission progress updated. Side mission triggered. Hearing this, Fong Bujue glanced at the mission panel. He saw that explore the forest, find and infiltrate the headquarters of the San Diego International Agricultural Group in the United States had been ticked off. There was a new main mission at the bottom. Obtain the relevant files of Jinkala and leave the building. In addition to the main mission, there was an additional side mission. Defeat at least 7 members of the management of the San Diego International Agricultural Group. Current progress 0/7. Very good. I feel like I can do this side mission while I'm working on the main mission. Fong Bujue said softly after he finished reading the mission. What are you mumbling about? Let's go. Liang Fifan was a little upset when he saw Lu Xing earlier. Now that he saw Brother Ju slowing down and mumbling to himself, he wanted to vent his anger on him. Therefore, when he scolded him, he deliberately walked behind Brother Ju and kicked him in the back. Fong Bujue was kicked in a very exaggerated way. He fell forward with his face down and curled up on the ground in a strange position. He did not move for a few seconds. The 2 Special Forces soldiers in charge of escorting him did not know if they should help him up. What are you doing? Playing dead? Liang Fifan saw this and took the initiative to step forward and kicked Brother Ju's thigh. Get up. It was reasonable for him to think that the man was faking his death because he did not use too much strength in his kicks. Even if they landed on a normal person, it would not have been much of a problem, much less a martial artist like Brother Ju. I'm not playing dead. After a second, Fong Bujue maintained his curled-up position and replied in a lazy voice. I'm just trying to block your view, huh? Liang Fifan did not realize what he was talking about at first. He repeated his words with confusion. Block our view. But before he could finish, Feng Bujue suddenly jumped up and waved the handcuffs that had been detached from his wrists twice before his eyes. Stand in my way so that I can remove the handcuffs. You, Liang Fifan was shocked. Feng Bujue had already made his move. He took out a wrench from somewhere. When Brother Ju was arrested, he was searched, but they only took away the pistol and some ammo that he kept outside of his luggage. Duong, he took down the 2 Special Forces soldiers beside him. Under the attack of a level 57 player's legendary weapon, helmets and whatnot were useless. Liang Fifan's reaction was not slow. When the 2 cannon fodders fell, he had already activated his martial arts and sent out a palm strike. The powerful palm strike was aimed at Feng Bujue's chest. It was like a wave, and it was incredibly cold. Tisuke, this kind of ice element skill again. Last time, when Liang Fifan's internal energy exploded, Brother Ju did not take it head-on because he felt that strange chill. Of course, this time, there was no reason for him to take it head-on. After saying that in his heart, Feng Bujue instantly activated body enhancement spell, Ultimate, and dodged this attack that was inches away from him. He circled behind Liang Fifan and swung the Z-wrench at him. Ping, ping, ping. Using a normal weapon to take down a mini-boss in one hit was impossible. At least Feng Bujue could not do it, but a few swordsmen of his level should be able to do it. Therefore, Brother Ju used a combo this time. Everyone knew how fast his hand was. Even if he did not rely on any skills, he could still produce an extremely high attack rate in a short period of time. However, when his attack landed on Liang Fifan's back, it made a sound like he was hitting ice. Hee. Liang Fifan laughed coldly. From the sound of his laughter, one could tell that he did not suffer much damage. I told you. You're only fast, but it is useless. As he spoke, he let out a loud roar and released his inner energy. I have the heaven and earth great technique internally, and I have the ice silkworm poisonous palm technique externally. I can absorb the spiritual energy of heaven and earth and convert it into internal energy. I can release cold poison, protect my body with cold light, and be invulnerable to swords and spears. My energy can split rocks and split gold. The Tu Chi in my Dantian can be as vast as the sea. As Liang Fifan spoke, his stats were indeed increasing at a speed visible to the naked eye, and it really did increase by 4 times. Feng Bujue looked at his opponent weakly and said, "You're like a villain in a Hong Kong comic." Suddenly, his tone and gaze became unusually sharp. "You have ignited my fire." When he said that, Brother Ju jumped back, pulled back the wrench, and held it with both hands. He pulled it at both sides, and the wrench turned into nunchaku. I'll tell you the truth. I've been hiding my true power. In fact, I practiced the ultimate Emperor's path of divinity internally and the cross-soul chasing staff externally. I have the Traceless and the Mokshita. My skills are immeasurable, and my staff skills are unparalleled. How are you going to fight me? He finished his speech several times faster than Liang Fifan's, and as he spoke, he twirled the nunchaku. Perhaps it was the equipment, but after Liang Fifan heard his introduction, cold sweat poured down his face. This kid can't be serious, right? Brother Fifan was a man who looked strong on the outside, but was weak on the inside. I remember that Lu Xing also practices the royal path of divinity, and normal people don't even know the name of this kind of martial art. Could it be that I am a reasonable person? Feng Bujue did not give Liang Fifan much time to think and continued. You and I have no history, but you attacked me for no reason. As the saying goes, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. You kicked me twice and I crippled you. It's fair. Chapter 1450. What Brother Ju said was not very fair to Liang Fifan, but it did not matter. Brother Fifan was not a reasonable person. Even if Feng Bujue did not say anything and attacked him directly, he would not have said anything. After a few seconds of staring at each other, Liang Fifan made the first move. Even though his movement was not fast, his movement was steady, his chi was strong, and with the help of his internal energy, he was not to be underestimated. Thankfully, Feng Bujue had a great advantage in terms of speed. There was a saying that in the world of martial arts, speed was the only thing that could not be defeated. No matter how strong the opponent's attack was, if it could not land a hit, it was meaningless. Ping ping. In the blink of an eye, Liang Fifin's attack missed. At the same time, his ribs were hit twice by the nunchaku, and there was the sound of ice being hit. Tisk, Brother Fifin immediately said, "I told you, this is not." Ping ping ping. Before he could say the word use, he was hit 3 more times on his back. Brother Ju did not want to waste time with him. He only had one word to say: fight. Using a weapon that he was not familiar with to launch a normal attack would not break through the opponent's defense in a short amount of time. Feng Bujue knew that very well. If Brother Ju really wanted to kill this mini-boss, he could have used a more powerful skill or demonic poker. However, he wanted to practice his nunchaku in this dungeon, so he did not use those methods to attack. Ping ping ping. In the process of hitting his opponent, Feng Bujue slowly gained some understanding of how to use the nunchaku. This allowed him to attack faster and faster, but even so, his attack frequency was not as high as when he used the wrench. After fighting for a while, Brother Ju could not help but think to himself, for a weapon like the wrench, after one hit, I can swing a second time, but the nunchaku, because there's a chain in the middle, every time I hit the target, the half of the nunchaku that hit the opponent will bounce back irregularly due to the counterforce. If I do not wait for this effect to disappear before I swing it a second time, then there's a high chance that the second attack will miss and the power will be reduced. But if I wait, the interval between the attacks will increase, and that means that I will slow down my attack speed. So this weapon is... When using nunchakus in the real world, one might not need to worry about this problem, but in Thriller Paradise, where one's fighting power was far greater than normal, and one could easily fight back and forth several times in 1 second, this kind of attack gap created by the weapon itself was a difficulty that had to be overcome. While he was thinking, Feng Bujue noticed that the 2 ends of the nunchaku were slowly changing color. One side was glowing red, and the other was glowing blue. He soon realized that this was the activation of the Z-wrench's special effect of, after charging to 50%, the 2 ends will be imbued with the element of ice and fire. Wait a minute. At that moment, Feng Bujue suddenly thought of something. Both ends have the element of ice, in other words. A thought flashed through his mind. Then his body began to move. Ping! After the nunchaku hit, Brother Ju actively reached out with his left hand to grab the part of the nunchaku that was bounced back. Then he used his left hand to fling the nunchaku away, and his right hand used the momentum to release the part of the nunchaku that he had been holding so that the nunchaku could be flung away. Such a simple action of switching hands not only solved the problem of attack intervals, but also, because there was a pulling motion when the staff was thrown out, it created an effect similar to a slingshot, which could make the subsequent attacks even more powerful. What? Liang Fifin, who was being hit, immediately felt that something was wrong. The attack that was originally harmless suddenly changed. Not only did it increase the attack power, it also dealt elemental damage. I see. Feng Bujue put away the nunchaku and twirled the nunchaku in his hand. He smiled and said, "Oh, what an interesting weapon." Liang Fifin had been through many battles, and he had a lot of combat experience. After going back and forth a few times, he felt that a prolonged battle would be disadvantageous to him. But now, Feng Bujue seemed to have realized something, and this made Liang Fifin even more cautious. I can't hold back anymore. If this drags on, I'm afraid something might go wrong. With that thought in mind, Liang Fifin channeled all of his power and pushed Heaven and Earth Grand Spell to its limit. He threw out the Ice Silkworm Poison Palm. The palm went straight for Liang Fifin's vitals, and the wind from the palm was incredibly sharp. Since he used all of his power and did not make any unnecessary movements, the speed of his attack was much faster than his usual performance. Not bad. When Feng Bujue saw that the wind from the palm was impenetrable, he sincerely praised Liang Fifin. Then, he threw out the Evil King's Inferno Scorch with one hand. Since it was not easy to dodge, he just had to fight it with a move. A fire elemental fist against an ice elemental palm would have an advantage in terms of elemental attributes. As long as the difference in energy level was not too big, he could easily dissolve Liang Fifen's attack. If he also had the upper hand in terms of energy, it would be even easier. Boom, boom, boom. In an instant, the sound of collision rose and fell. The wind from the fist and the shadow of the palm intertwined. In this head-on confrontation, the difference in strength between the two sides was quickly revealed. Halfway through the fight, Liang Fifen's arm was already sore and powerless. The inner energy that he had gathered was also worn out in the exchange of blows. Helpless, Brother Fifen could only swipe his palm and change his style to retreat. He quickly turned around and jumped out of the battle circle. Feng Bujue did not chase after him, because in this round of attacks, he had also suffered a small loss. TSK. What a good ice silkworm poison palm. When Brother Fifen stopped his attack, he looked at the word poisoned in his status bar and thought to himself, although the ice elemental attribute was neutralized by my counterattack, the poison still passed through my palm energy. I can't be immune to it. On the other side, Liang Fifen was shocked. How dare he? This kid can defeat both of my palms with a single punch, and he even did it with ease. His skill is obviously way above mine. But why didn't he directly attack me? Why did he use the nunchaku to fight? Could it be he wants to tease me? Before he could think further, Feng Bujue, who had been waiting for a while, attacked again. In the previous few seconds, Brother Fifen did not make a move, because he wanted to observe the actual effect of his opponent's cold poison. After confirming that the poison only had a slight slowing effect, and that the loss of HP was not fast, Feng Bujue decided to kill his opponent first, and then detoxify himself. This way, he could avoid being repeatedly poisoned in the process of battle and waste his items. Ping, 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 ping. In the blink of an eye, Liang Fifen did not even have time to catch his breath, and another round of nunchaku attacks came one after another. This time, Feng Bujue's fighting style had changed. Although his movements were not skillful, the way he swung the nunchaku had changed from a simple one-handed back and forth to a two-handed dance. Whether it was the rhythm of the attack, the power, or the changes of the moves, it was more than one level higher than before. Oh no! Facing the more powerful dual attribute attack of ice and fire, Liang Fifen secretly cursed. He knew, this round of attacks, he could not use his internal energy to protect his body. Sure enough, after the actual attack, even though Brother Fifen had set up his posture and waved his arms to parry, it was still difficult for him to defend. On the other hand, Feng Bujue relied on his perfect body movement to win against Brother Fifen, and he was having a lot of fun. His position was like a ghost, and he dodged left and right, elusive. In the process of the continuous battle, his nunchaku attacks became smoother and faster. Obviously, compared to the Special Forces soldiers who were defeated in one hit, this kind of mini-boss who could withstand multiple attacks was a good training dummy for Brother Fifen's nunchaku skills. I can't go on like this. Where there's life, there's hope. I can't lose my life here. In the midst of the defeat, Liang Fifen had the idea of escaping, but he also knew that it was not that easy to escape. But this kid is faster than me. I can't escape directly. Thinking of this, he could not help but glance at the few entrances and exits nearby. Damn it, why is there no backup until now? Actually, it was normal for there to be no backup. 90% of the area of the building was fully automated. Even the lobby on the first floor did not have a front desk or a security guard, and even the cleaning was done by robots. There were many surveillance cameras, and the security guards in the monitoring room also saw the fight, but the security guards were like Brother Fifen. They did not think that Feng Bujue, an external martial arts practitioner, could last more than 10 moves from Brother Fifen. Therefore, in the first few minutes of the fight, no one thought of calling for backup. However, the situation was different now. The people in the monitoring room were not fools. Even if their cultivation was not high, after seeing the situation of the fire fist and ice palm, anyone could see that Brother Fifen was at a disadvantage. Until then, They urgently reported the situation in the lobby on the first floor and asked for backup. Wait, wait. Finally, Liang Fifan, who was gradually losing his strength, used his last move, begging for mercy. What? Feng Bujue was in the middle of the fight. How could he stop? He asked while fighting. You want to surrender? Yes, I surrender. Liang Fifan quickly said. You stop first. Umph. Brother Fifan heard and sneered. What's in it for me if I accept your surrender? I can help you. Liang Fifan reacted quickly in this regard. You want to steal the company's information, right? I can tell you where the archives are. Bang. Before he could finish his sentence, a gunshot rang out from behind him. At the same time, blood burst out from Liang Fifan's leg. At this time, Brother Fifan was dealing with Feng Bujue's nunchaku with all his strength. He had no extra internal force and spirit to worry about the defense of his lower body, so this shot easily broke through his defense. He fell to the ground and let out a scream. When Brother Fifan saw this, he did not continue to chase after him. Instead, he looked at the person who fired the shot more than 10 meters away. Shit, Liang Fifan. At the same time, Lu Xing, who was holding a gun, also walked over while cursing. He rushed over after receiving the news of the request for backup. As a result, when he arrived at the scene, he just happened to hear Brother Fifan's rebellious lines. How could he tolerate this? He immediately picked up his gun and shot him to shut him up. You dare shoot me? Liang Fifan turned his head and saw that it was Lu Xing who shot him. He was so angry that his eyes were bloodshot. Shoot you? Lu Xing said, You traitor, if I don't shoot you, you've already revealed the company's confidential information. If it weren't for our previous friendship, I would have already shot you to death. This was the truth. Lu Xing's marksmanship was godly, far above Liang Fifan's. If he wanted to kill Liang Fifan, this shot would have definitely hit the back of his head and not the leg. Oomph. Liang Fifan knew that he was in the wrong, and his actions were all recorded by the surveillance camera. It was not good for him to lose his temper, so he could only defend himself. You idiot. I just wanted to use a stalling tactic. How could I betray the company? Well, now is not the time to talk about this. Lu Xing did not want to listen to his nonsense, so he interrupted. Let's take care of the intruder first. Before he finished speaking, he fired another 3 shots. The bullets flew towards Brother Ju's head, heart, and abdomen. Although it was a series of shots, the accuracy of these 3 shots was terrifying. This marksmanship was comparable to an S-level marksmanship player. Facing such a fierce attack, Feng Bujue's fighting spirit rose. He took advantage of the situation and dodged backwards like the Matrix. He dodged the 2 bullets that were aimed at his head and heart. He then used his swinging hand to use telepathic finger and caught the bullet that was aimed at his abdomen. Everything happened in a short 2 seconds. After completing this series of actions, Brother Ju even raised his hand like he was showing off. He parted his fingers and showed the enemy the bullet that had been squashed fell through the gaps between his fingers. So it's like this. Lu Xing understood that this intruder was using his actions to tell him, guns are useless against me. Good. In the next second, Lu Xing casually threw away his gun and used his internal energy to create a doqi field that was stronger than Liang Fifan's. Since you think you are strong, then why don't you come and experience my 72 moves of the hollow bright fist? After he finished speaking, he took a big stride forward and used both of his hands to attack. Compared to Liang Fifan's methodical moves that relied on the cold poison internal force, Lu Xing's fist technique could be said to be exquisite beyond compare. The power of his fist was faintly discernible, soft with tenacity, striking reality with illusion. It was already in the realm of great success. With this kind of technique, even Brother Ju did not dare to be careless. Feng Bujue waved his nunchaku and repeatedly waved it along a path that was similar to the endless symbol. He fought and retreated to avoid the sharpness of the hollow bright fist. Lu Xing, this kid, since he mastered the left and right mutual defense technique, his fist technique has reached a higher level. Moreover, his Emperor's path of divinity has reached the 12th gate. His internal energy is above my heaven and earth great technique. Damn it. Liang Fifan crawled to the side and watched the fight in front of him. In his heart, he somewhat hoped that Lu Xing would be killed because the latter had already threatened his position. On the other hand, Feng Bujue did not stop thinking as he retreated. I also need to practice my defense. If I had 2 nunchaku, maybe it would be easier. But now I only have 1. How to switch between offense and defense? I need to think about it carefully. While he was thinking, Lu Xing was fighting more and more bravely. After roughly figuring out, at least Lu Xing thought so, the strength of his opponent, Lu Xing immediately activated the pressure boost ability of the Emperor's Path of Divinity and increased his internal energy by 8 times. With an explosive speed, he took half a step forward and punched. Chapter 1451. This is not going to be easy. Looking at the incoming fist, Feng Bujue sighed helplessly. At the same time, he activated a detection skill that could be considered a godly skill. My skateboard shoes. This was a skill that Doomsday Assault had used on Brother Jew during the Underworld Frontlines battle against Zombie Blade's first team during the semi-finals of S2. The effect was, after activation, the next melee damage you receive will be reduced by 90%, and all the special effects of the attack will not be triggered. When the attack ends, you will automatically teleport behind the attacker and gain double attack speed buff for 4 seconds. Even though Lu Xing had died under Feng Bujue's scheme in the end during Doomsday Assault, the current situation was obviously different. Lu Xing did not know that the players knew how to use body blocking skills. His punch was supposed to land. However, the result of the actual hit was... Feng Bujue stood there and casually raised his hand to block, and he withstood Lu Xing's attack that was 8 times stronger than usual. Seeing this scene, not to mention Lu Xing himself, even Liang Fifan, who had fallen the distance, was shocked to the point his mouth was agape and eyes were wide open, and he was overwhelmed with shock in his heart. Whoosh! While they were still in shock, Feng Bujue had used the effect of the skill to teleport behind Lu Xing. The double attack speed bonus only lasted for 4 seconds, so it would be a waste if he did not use it. Feng Bujue made use of this 4-second gap to swing his nunchaku and hit Lu Xing repeatedly. The method he used was the switch of hands that he had come up with earlier. Other than that, because he had been fighting with Liang Fifan for a long time, the Z-Wrench's charge had reached 80%, so its 4th special effect combo attack had been activated. At the very least, before the battle ended, Feng Bujue would use his nunchaku to attack the same target repeatedly, and the damage would gradually increase. Without a doubt, a special effect like this, where the damage increased with the number of attacks and had no upper limit, would be very scary if used properly. Feng Bujue's attack frequency was not slow to begin with, and with the buff from his attack speed, his damage output exploded again in a short amount of time. After this round of attacks, Lu Xing, who was hit from the back, could not hold on any longer. He staggered and tumbled forward, and he coughed out a mouthful of blood. Who would have thought? Lu Xing held his chest and turned around to stare at Feng Bujue. You're just a normal martial artist, but you have such skill. Who are you? He did not know that Feng Bujue had used a skill that reduced damage by 90% to block his attack, and he did not know that Feng Bujue had many defensive items that reduced damage by a percentage. He only knew the person in front of him had blocked his strongest punch with one hand, and not only he was able to counterattack attack to counterattack. This situation was already enough to make Lu Xing and Liang Fifan, who was already injured at the side, lose their will to fight. Side quest progress updated. Looks like the 2 of you have admitted defeat. After hearing the system voice, Feng Bujue glanced at the quest pane and found that the quest progress bar had changed to 27. He immediately understood that the moment the 2 NPCs gave up, the quest definition of defeat was considered complete. In other words, he did not need to cripple or kill the other party to complete the quest completion. As long as he could determine the winner, it would be enough. Then, I will not accompany you. Since he had achieved his goal, there was no reason to waste time with them. After Feng Bujue said this, he turned around and walked towards the elevator. Wait, compared to Liang Fifan, Lu Xing was more responsible. Even though he knew that he was not a match for Brother Ju, he still stood up shakily and shouted at him. Where are you going? Of course, I am going to steal your confidential information. Brother Ju replied in a matter-of-fact tone. You know where the archives is? Lu Xing asked suspiciously. I don't know. Feng Bujua shrugged and continued. Furthermore, I don't think I'll be able to get the answer out of the two of you, so... He paused. I think I should go look for it myself. After all, it has to be somewhere in this building. I will go up floor by floor, and eventually I will find it. Humph. Ha ha. Hearing this, Liang Fifan laughed loudly. After laughing for a few seconds, he looked at Brother Ju and said, Kid, do you think that you are invincible after defeating the two of us? Let me tell you. Okay. Feng Bujue did not want to hear him finish. He interrupted. Are you going to say that the two of you are the weakest among the 4 heavenly kings? Oh no. The two of you are the weakest in the management of the company? Then you want to spoil for me how many people are stronger than you, and what their nicknames and martial arts are. Finally, you want to tell me that even if I can defeat so-and-so and so-and-so, there are still a few people that I can't defeat. His guess was pretty close. It was as if he had peeked at Liang Fifan's script. Brother Fifan was stunned when he heard this. He did not know what to do and said, how did you know? That's enough. Brother Ju tilted his head and walked past him. You can keep those words to yourself. I am not interested. After that, he walked into the elevator and pressed the button for the 2nd floor. Brother Ju did not listen to Liang Fifan's threats. It was not because he was conceited, but because he did not think it was necessary. Even if there was a strong enemy, he could use his own data to observe the strength of the enemy. It was more reliable than hearing it from someone else. Ding! They arrived at the 1st floor in the blink of an eye. When the elevator door opened, a person standing 10 meters away was staring at Feng Bujue. He was a Caucasian man in his 30s. His appearance was average, and his hairstyle was short and brown. He was wearing a white shirt, black trousers, and a dark-colored tie. No matter how one looked at him, he looked like an ordinary office worker. But Feng Bujue could observe that this person's strength was above Lu Xing and Liang Fifan. This is interesting. Brother Ju looked at the man in front of him and said, How did you know I would come to the 2nd floor? I didn't know, the white man answered. Don't get me wrong, the white man said. I didn't mean to wait for you here. It's just that my office is on the 2nd floor. I'm standing here because I want to see which floor the elevator will go to. I didn't expect you to stop on my floor. So, you don't plan to stop me? Feng Bujue asked as he walked out of the elevator. Huh? The white man laughed and replied, If you didn't appear before me, then so be it. But since you're already here, as a member of the company's management, how can I pretend that I didn't see you? Is that so? Feng Bujue nodded. I am Feng Bujue. Can you tell me? No problem. The white man used Chinese with a slight accent. I come from England. My real name is Joseph David, and my Chinese name is Chun Xiaolong. But everyone calls me Brother America. With regard to my position, I suppose you can call me the general manager of the company. There were too many points in the man's words. Feng Bujue could only focus on the main points. Let's not talk about why an Englishman like you is called Brother America. Your company's building is more than 10 floors high, but the general manager's office is on the 2nd floor? Is that not allowed? Brother America asked. Is there a rule that the higher the position, the higher the floor the office is on? Brother Ju scratched his chin and said in English, Good point. All right, let's stop here and there. For someone who is about to die, I don't want to know too much about him, Brother America said and took half a step forward. Then he lowered his arms, the back of his hands facing outwards. His fingers relaxed slightly, and his feet were parallel to each other. Then he slowly raised his arms before his chest. His left arm formed a half circle, and his palms faced the yin palm, while his right palm turned into the yang palm. After this series of movements that were as smooth as flowing water, a beautiful starting position was formed. What are you? Feng Bujue looked at the data flowing around the man and knew that his kung fu was a whole level higher than the two people downstairs. Instantly, he stopped moving and focused. Without roots and without limits, everything is natural. Brother America waved his hands in a circle and stood upright. He announced loudly, Tai Chi. Chapter 1452. Okay. For some reason, Feng Bujue couldn't help but blurt out a few sentences in English when faced with Brother America, who spoke Mandarin. You can do it. As he praised Brother America, he put away his nunchaku and stretched his shoulders and neck. Seeing Brother Jew's actions, Brother America's heart skipped a beat. He thought to himself, this kid, once he saw that I was using Tai Chi, he's going to give up on his fighting style. Actually, Brother America had already guessed that Brother Jew was not someone to be trifled with before he met him. Earlier in the meeting room, when Liang Fifan and Lu Xing were arguing to capture the intruder, Brother America felt that things were not as simple as they seemed, although breaking through the no-man's land, single-handedly killing his way into the jungle, and taking down dozens of Special Forces soldiers in a short period of time was nothing out of the ordinary for the management of the Holy Land Yago organization. But from another perspective, the intruder was not a member of the organization. For an external martial artist who did not rely on the golden nitrogen pill to be able to do these things, it was not normal. Brother America, who was slightly weaker than Captain East Deity, was able to sit in the second position of the organization because of his intelligence and shrewdness. He could think of things that others could not think of. Therefore, when everyone else thought that Liang Fifan and Lu Xing could easily solve this matter, Brother America, who was sitting opposite Captain East Deity, had a serious look on his face. Brother America didn't wait long. After thinking for a while, he slightly retracted his yin and yang palms, swung his arms, gathered his strength, and attacked fiercely. This was the hand-wielding Pipa style. The strength was as heavy as a mountain, but the speed was as light as a feather. The attack was as powerful as the wind and thunder. However, Feng Bujue was prepared for this. He nimbly rolled on the ground to avoid his opponent's attack. Then, he kicked out with both feet, aiming for Brother America's shin bone with a scissor kick. Stop dreaming. Brother America was not stupid. As a Tai Chi grandmaster, he knew the weaknesses of his own martial arts very well. When they were fighting, Brother America's kung fu was almost flawless. However, if they were in a close-range fight, no matter how exquisite his moves and nigong were, he would not be able to use his full strength. Therefore, before he made this move, Brother America had already tightened his lower body to prevent his opponent from bringing the fight to a ground battle. Bang! In the end, when Feng Bujue's powerful scissor legs closed, there was the sound of air exploding from the clash of internal energy. Brother America's legs were frozen in the horse stance and did not move at all. TSK. Brother Jew saw that his opponent did not fall as he had planned. He thought to himself, "You're forcing me to use my skills again, aren't you?" It was obvious that Feng Bujue did not want to use his skills. Although he could use any skills he wanted, the consumption of skills was still substantial. For example, the move, My Skateboard Shoes, earlier was powerful, but it consumed a total of 1,200 stamina points. That was more than 20% of his total stamina points. If he used his powerful skills recklessly, his stamina points would be depleted in a matter of minutes. However, when faced with an opponent who was superior to him in terms of combat skills, strength, and speed, it was almost impossible to defeat them efficiently without using skills. Fall. Brother Jew did not succeed in his first move, so he changed his stance. He twisted his body to the side and followed it up with a scissor kick. Logically speaking, this kind of sudden change in attack speed would not be as powerful as the first attack. That was what Brother America thought as well. How would he know that the scissor kick from before was just a normal scissor kick, and the whip kick from after was the devilish child's whip kick? A second later, Brother America fell to the ground in shock. He slowly yelled out, with a northeastern accent. Before he fell to the ground, Feng Bujue took advantage of this time to perform a move called the Great Wall of Jericho. When the enemy is face down, face the enemy's feet. Pull the enemy's legs up and fix the ankle under your armpit. Then, sit on the enemy's waist. The power of this move was shocking. While it suppressed the opponent, it also caused great pain. It was almost impossible to break. The only downside of this move was that it was very difficult to perform in a real battle. It was obvious that if you could beat an opponent face down in a real battle, you would not be able to use any kind of move on him. Instead, you would just step on his head and cause more damage. If it were not for the special effect of the scissor kick, Phong Bujue would not have been able to find an opportunity to use this move. Ugh, you! This! Before Brother America could recover from the shock of tripping, the sharp pain from his waist made him unable to say a word. If you're willing to stop resisting, I will let you go, Phong Bujue said calmly as he increased the force of his kick. Otherwise, according to my estimation, in less than 10 seconds, your spine will break. Oomph. Brother America heard this and did not reply. He only grunted and gathered his true chi. Then, he suddenly slammed his palm on the ground. Even though the palm strike was powerful, it was not the kind of palm strike that was meant for brute force. When the wind from the palm strike landed on the ground, it only left a small crack on the ground. The main force of the strike was pushed upward in a way that was incredibly resilient. It knocked Brother America and Brother Jew, who was riding on Brother America's back, off the ground. Once the two of them were off the ground, Brother America's upper body could curl forward. Brother Jew's The Great Wall of Jericho was broken. Even though Phong Bujue was still using his arms to clamp Brother America's legs, it did not mean much because Brother America's waist was no longer under pressure. Now, he could move his limbs freely. Brother America moved his legs and broke free from Brother Jew's clamp. Then, he threw a punch at Brother Jew's jaw. Oh! Unexpectedly, Phong Bujue saw the fist coming at him. It looked like he had been waiting for this for a long time. He immediately let out a strange cry and changed his position. He grabbed Brother America's arm and did a cross. The active person and the passive person's body form a cross. The active person's legs are placed on the passive person's neck and chest. The passive person's arm is passed through the active person's crotch. The active person uses both hands to press the passive person's arm in front of his chest. Then, the active person uses both hands to press the passive person's arm in front of his chest. 2 seconds later, the two of them landed on the ground again. Even though they were in a different position from before, Brother America was still locked in place. Brother America had just broken one move and was hit by another. Naturally, he was furious. He thought that his Tai Chi Kung Fu was invincible in a standing fight. But now, not only was he unable to perform his best moves, but he also had to fight with his opponent on the ground in a WWE-style brawl. It was a loss of dignity for him as the second in command of the organization. Thinking about this, Brother America couldn't help but be angry. He was so angry that he became even bolder. In a fit of anger, he opened his mouth and bit Brother Jew's calf. To be honest, this was one way to break the crosslock. However, the prerequisite was that your opponent had to be someone who would relax because of the pain from the calf. Go ahead and bite me. However, after Phong Bujue was bitten, not only did he not relax, he even tightened the lock. I don't mind giving you a few pieces of meat. But let me say this first. If I lose too much meat, I might slice you up and eat you later to replenish my protein. When he said this, his tone was calm. However, in Brother America's ears, it made his hair stand on end. Because his attitude didn't sound like a threat or a joke at all. Instead, it sounded like he was stating a plan, a fact that could very well be put into action. After a few seconds, Brother America decided to go all out. After a scream, he broke the arm that was locked in place. With a roll, he pulled himself out of Brother Jew's grip. However, Phong Bujue's movements were like a shadow. Almost at the same time that Brother America used his strength, he had already predicted his opponent's intention and was ready for it. Therefore, Brother America had only rolled a few times when Phong Bujue pounced on him again. He waited for the opportunity to grab the arm that was still intact and used a Kimura lock, using one hand to pass under the opponent's elbow and the other hand to grab the opponent's wrist on the same side. The two hands interlocked and adjusted the position to form a lateral pressure. Using the opponent's elbow as a fulcrum, the opponent would be forced to surrender. Once again, Brother America was firmly locked in place. This time, Brother America was so anxious that blood was about to come out of his eyes. He screamed, "Let go of me!" "Ha! I'll let go if you surrender." Feng Bujue laughed casually. "If you don't mind the pain, I'll play with you a little longer." This casual attitude was no doubt a sign that he was confident in his ground fighting skills. Even though Brother Ju was not the type of person who was good at ground fighting, his understanding of judo, wrestling, Brazilian jiu-jitsu, and other fighting styles was at the level of an expert. With zero time difference, he only needed to pick a few moves from his memory, and he could use them on the spot. Speaking of which, for that, he had Blade Runner to thank. As everyone knew, Child Jian had a good relationship with Brother Ju. Other than the members of Underworld Frontline, he should be the one who joined Feng Bujue most of the time. In the daily leveling scenarios that were not written in the book, Brother Ju teamed up with Child Jian many times. When Blade Runner was around, Not a Scaredy Cat was around as well. Long before these two became lovers, Not a Scaredy Cat would often use all sorts of fighting skills on the former. After they became lovers, the frequency of the attacks increased. Furthermore, Not a Scaredy Cat's fighting skills were of such high standard, the variety of moves, the precision of her movements, and the flexibility of her usage. With Feng Bujue's personality, he would not miss the moment when Child Jian was tortured. Every time Blade Runner was tortured by the woman using various moves, Brother Ju would stand by the side and watch. He would even make some sarcastic remarks at the right moment. As the saying went, even if one had not tasted pork, one would have seen a pig run. Under this influence, Brother Ju naturally picked up quite a number of moves. "Brother, I still have to give you a piece of advice." Several seconds later, Feng Bujue saw that the man was still hesitating, so he added, "I don't care how good your Tai Chi is. When you're tripped by me and forced into a ground fight, you have no chance of winning. If you know what's good for you, you'd better surrender now." Brother America was not someone who would be easily persuaded, but at this point, he gave it some thought and realized that his chance of winning was not high. His right hand was broken, and his left hand was bound. If this continued, even if he could break free, he would only be in a more passive position. Just as Brother America was about to give up, a sudden change occurred. At that moment, a series of booms could be heard coming from afar. Not long after, following the two loudest explosions, two holes were blasted open in the ceiling, and two robust figures jumped out from the two holes. Just by listening to the sounds, it was easy to tell that the two people who had entered the battlefield had used a kind of drill technique to drill all the way down from a very high floor. When the dust settled, the two figures stood still. Feng Bujue took a closer look. He saw that the muscular white man on the left was 9 feet tall, with a strong back and a wide chest. His upper body was bare, revealing his perfect sculpture-like muscles. He only wore a pair of tight shorts, showing a sense of unruliness and carefreeness. Although his appearance was extraordinary, there was an amiable smile at the corner of his mouth. She then looked at the muscular Asian man on the right. He was 8 feet tall, with a leopard head and round eyes. He had an imposing appearance. He didn't wear any clothes on his upper body, but there was a leather belt around his chest and a pair of tight black leather pants on his lower body. His overall appearance complemented each other. Although he wasn't as handsome as his companion, there was an indescribable melancholy in his eyes. "Hey, boy," after the muscular white man stood still, he struck a professional bodybuilding pose. He looked at Brother Ju and said, "Looks like you're pretty good at wrestling. Do you dare to spar with me? Billy_Heronon? F at Seek_." Unexpectedly, before Feng Bujue could reply, the muscular Asian man took the lead and said, "When it comes to wrestling, with me, Ben_Darkholm, there is no need for you to embarrass yourself." Oh, when Billy heard this, he was obviously unconvinced. "What do you mean? You think you are tough, right? So what if I am? You have a problem with that?" Vin did not back down in terms of words. As the two talked, their eyes met, and they gradually approached each other. They looked like they were ready to fight. "Don't fight! Don't fight!" Seeing this, the American bro hurriedly picked up his heavily accented Chinese. Enduring the pain of being locked down, he shouted. "You have to get me out first." "Cut the crap. It has nothing to do with you." However, Billy Haranon ignored the request of the general manager. "That's right. I only need a few minutes to settle this. Just bear with it." Van had the same attitude. When the two of them replied to each other, they were still staring at each other. Soon, it developed from staring at each other to a physical altercation. For some reason, these two muscular men, who were very cool and had good fighting skills, started to fight each other not long after they appeared. Even Fong Bujue could not understand what was going on. Anyway, when he came back to his senses, Billy Haranon and Van were already wrestling on the ground. The two of them were wrestling fiercely while making all kinds of weird noises. In between, they were saying, "Good, you like that, huh?" and other English dialogue in a subtle tone. Chapter 1453. Ding! With a crisp ring, the elevator door opened. When Fong Bujue stepped out of the elevator, he stepped onto the top floor of the headquarters of the Yago International Agricultural Group in Holy Land. At this moment, there was a black man dressed exactly like Brother America waiting in the corridor in front of him. "You're really something." Captain Dongxian looked at his brother Bujue and said in thick Mandarin, "You actually defeated 5 of our top management experts. With such strength, I'm afraid you're already stronger than me." Fong Bujue heard this and pondered for a second. Then he said, "Actually, technically speaking, I only defeated 2.5 people with my strength, though." "What do you mean?" Captain Dongxian heard this answer and was puzzled. According to the report he received, there were a total of 5 people who went to stop the invaders, and all of them had lost their ability to fight. Liang Fifan and Lu Xing were defeated by me. 2 seconds later, Fong Bujue replied, "But Brother America, strictly speaking, my fight with him wasn't over yet." As he said this, he showed a subtle expression. "When we were fighting, Mr. Harrington and Mr. Darkholm from your company suddenly appeared and started to wrestle. For the next 5 minutes, they kept changing their postures and moaning. Brother America and I were shocked, so we temporarily stopped fighting and watched from the side." He paused for a moment. To make a long story short, when the two brothers excitedly started to pull at each other's clothes, Brother America was too engrossed in watching and showed a flaw. I took the opportunity to put a neck choke on him, and he fainted from lack of oxygen. Then I went over and easily knocked out Harrington and Van, who were still wrestling and rolling on the ground. Of course, what he said was true. Everything that happened was recorded by the surveillance camera. However, Captain Dongxian did not see it with her own eyes, and the security guards who saw it with their own eyes did not report in detail due to various reasons. They only reported the results. After dealing with the two brothers who had sent themselves to Fong Bujue's side quest progress had reached 57. Then, he went to Brother America's office and searched for some information on his computer. After confirming the location of the archive room, he went to the top floor. Captain Dongxian pushed up the glasses on the bridge of his nose and sighed. "Those two idiots. They must have eaten too many steroids and had a chemical reaction with the gold nitrogen pill in their bodies, which lowered their IQ. All right, I'm not interested in your training methods." Fong Bujue interrupted her impatiently. "Anyway, you are here to stop me, right? Then don't be so long-winded. Let's do it." Captain Dongxian chuckled. "Sure." As soon as he said good, he heard 4 buzzing noises. The sound followed the movement of the shadows. As soon as the sound was heard, the shadows were already there. In the blink of an eye, 4 shadows, who had been lying in ambush, suddenly appeared from 4 different directions around Fong Bujue. They were very close to his brother Ju. To get rid of pests, we still have to use the 4 famous hunters," Captain Dongxian said as he turned around with his hands behind his back. In his opinion, the moment the sneak attack was launched, the intruder would definitely die. Unexpectedly, ugh, just as Captain Dongxian turned around, for gloomy and painful groans rang out one after another like firecrackers. "What?" Captain Dongxian, who was both shocked and confused, turned around abruptly and saw the 4 famous hunters fall to the ground at the same time. "That's a good plan." Feng Bujue, who was standing in the middle of the four, said in a lazy tone, "Find 4 assassins in full-body optical camouflage suits to ambush me in the corridor facing the elevator. When I come to the middle of them, the 4 of them can instantly close in on me." He shrugged. "Too bad, it doesn't work on me." Before Brother Ju could finish his sentence, Captain Dongxian was already sweating profusely. For Feng Bujue, this wasn't a complicated matter. When the elevator door opened, he used his data perspective to look at the corridor and immediately discovered the ambush. Seeing this, he quietly took out his psycho poker and deliberately walked to the middle of the 4 famous hunters. Then, he stopped to talk to Captain Dongxian. When the 4 famous hunters attacked together, Brother Ju, who had been waiting for a long time, activated the frenzy effect of the poker card and led the 4 famous hunters to attack each other at an equal distance. But this, from Captain Dongxian's point of view, it was quite scary. Because he had turned around to show off earlier, he did not see Brother Ju make his move. Therefore, he had no idea how Brother Ju managed to discover the ambush and kill the 4 experts who were hiding in the dark in an instant. Speaking of which, these 4 aren't members of the management team. Feng Bujue waited for a while. When he saw that the mission progress didn't update, he fixed his gaze on Captain Dongxian. "That means I still have to kill you. When fear reaches a certain level, it will turn into anger and even killing intent." Captain East Immortal was currently in such a situation. He had already determined in his heart that the enemy in front of him was stronger than him, and his strength was unfathomable. However, as the captain of Count William's guards, he could not run away. There was no way out here. So, he turned his fear into motivation. He gathered all his inner strength and used his special skill, Captain Dongxian's hand knife. In the management team of the company, Captain Dongxian's combat ability was the best, second only to Count William. And his trump card was this hand knife. His hand knife was one of a kind in this universe. It was the only successful case of using flesh and blood to cut Jinkala. Even Brother America's Taiji fist couldn't block this hand knife. So, his combat ability was above Brother America's. And at this moment, this hand knife was aimed at Feng Bujue. Whoosh! Wherever the hand blade passed by, even cracks appeared in the space. Feng Bujue's body was also hit by the hand knife and was split into 2. However, your hand knife is quite powerful. Just as Captain Dongxian thought that he had succeeded, Brother Ju's voice came from behind him. Before he could finish speaking, the Feng Bujue that Captain Dongxian had cut in half disappeared like an illusion. At this time, Captain Dongxian, whose blood had turned cold, slowly turned his head. He looked at his Brother Ju in disbelief, who had appeared on the other side of the corridor. "You? Were you?" For Captain Dongxian to ask this question, it meant that he had already determined that his opponent wasn't human. Of course, from how Feng Bujue saw it, he had done something very normal. When the enemy made his move, he used a skill called narcissism. It was a consumable skill that he had obtained from Underworld Frontline. The effect was, when the skill was activated, the player's real body would instantly enter the dimensional space and leave behind an invincible afterimage at the original spot where the player had been standing before the attack. After entering the phase space, the player's original body can ignore gravity and move in a straight line in any direction. However, the player cannot use skills and cannot come into contact with objects in the original phase space. 5 seconds later, the main body would appear at the original position in a reasonable manner. At the same time, the afterimage would disappear. During this period, the damage the afterimage received would be converted into stamina points and replenished to the main body. The main body had moved forward a certain distance in the phase space. That was it. "What's wrong?" You seem to be quite surprised. Feng Bujue turned around and saw Captain Dongxian's expression. Then, a malicious thought formed in his mind. He immediately started to talk nonsense in an inscrutable tone. "You don't believe what you see in front of you? Or you don't believe what you've experienced?" "Huh?" He paused for half a second and then said in a low voice, "Speaking of which, when did you start to have the illusion that I'm not using catoptric deflection?" 5 minutes after Captain Dongxian lost her will to fight, Feng Bujue arrived at the archives room at the southeast corner of the building. Brother Ju really did not expect the filing room to be filled with actual paper files. The drawers that were filled with files stacked up the entire space. If there was no hint, finding the core files related to Jinkala would take a whole day. Thankfully, this was a normal difficulty scenario, so Brother Ju did not spend too much effort before he found the shelf with the file index. From there, he confirmed the drawer of the section where the information that he was looking for was. Not long after, he found the file and stuffed it into his bag. At this point, the scenario could be considered cleared. Considering that Brother Ju was on the top floor of the building, he only needed to fire a skill at the ceiling and jump out from the hole. Then, the main quest of obtaining the files related to Jinkala and leaving the building would be completed. Of course, he could not rule out the possibility of a new main quest like Escape from the Jungle, but based on the game's progress, the chance of that happening was very low. I'm still missing one. That's quite annoying. In the end, Feng Bujue, who had victory in his grasp, looked at the side quest that was already 67% progress and decided to wait. There were not many rewards for normal difficulty. Even though he had selected this mode to familiarize himself with the nunchaku, and he had already achieved his goal, he was only one step away from completing the quest. It would be a waste if he did not take the reward that was already within his grasp. Therefore, after giving it some thought, Feng Bujue walked out of the archives room and into the corridor. He stood under one of the surveillance cameras and started to dance. He was dancing the dance steps from MC Hammer's popular song, I Can't Touch This. It was personally taught by a breakbeat dancer from Yuchaolien. That arrogant crab steps and all sorts of turning and spreading out his hands shocked the Holy Land Yago Corporation employees who were watching him in the monitoring room. This provocation was obviously very effective. In less than 3 minutes, a group of black figures had arrived at the corridor. The leader was dressed in a suit. His hair was gray, and he walked with a majestic gait. Who else could it be other than Count William? Behind him were all members of the management of the company. There were old and young people, men and women. Their skin color and attire spanned from ancient times to modern times. There were people in suits, vests, military uniforms from World War II, and ancient Chinese costumes. There were people with small beards and big beards. Some of them were holding zither, some were holding trombones, some were holding wooden swords, and some were even holding shampoo bottles. This large group of strange people followed behind Count William and rushed over from the corridor in an aggressive manner. It was as if they were gangsters who were about to get into a fight when they were about 10 meters away from Feng Bujue. Count William stopped in his tracks. He raised both his hands and waved them forward. He even said a very familiar line, "Kill him." Following his command, the people behind him rushed forward for both sides. Amidst the murderous roars, they pounced on Feng Bujue. Kill me? When Brother Ju saw this, he sneered. At that moment, as long as he wanted to, he could clear the level at any time. Therefore, he did not need to hold back his stamina or spirit power. He could use his skills freely. Faced with the crowd rushing toward him, Feng Bujue picked up the wrench. Because he had not hit anyone for a while, the wrench's charge had decreased, and it returned to its wrench state. He aimed it at the burr that stood out at the front of the crowd and hit him in the face. That person was also unlucky. He was hit so hard that his head was bleeding. His eyes rolled back, and he collapsed to the ground. Before he fainted, he said, "I wish you good health." At the same time, the system notification rang in Feng Bujue's ears, informing him that the side quest had been completed. However, Brother Ju still had no intention of leaving. He had already observed that other than Count William, most of the people rushing toward him were about the same level as Liang Fifan. Under the premise that he did not need to conserve his strength, it would not be difficult to fight them alone. Therefore, Feng Bujue, who was determined to fight, charged into the crowd with a wrench in his hand and started to fight with them, with the sound of the wrench hitting their heads. The Holy Land Yago Group's executives fell one by one. They were shouting, "Wonderful! Wonderful! You're all trash. You won't even give me $100. Where's your F asterisk king Italian cannon? I refused at first. I've never seen such a shameless person, and other strange lines. The thing that surprised Feng Bujue the most was that one of the executives, who looked like a gentleman, cursed before he was knocked out. This was the first time that Brother Ju had heard an NPC curse in such an authentic way, and he was quite surprised. In any case, the more Feng Bujue fought in this strange battle, the braver he became. The wrench soon morphed back into the nunchaku. When he switched hands to attack, he changed the swing of the staff that he had used against Lu Xing to neutralize the Kongming punch earlier. He used a swing of the staff that was similar to the swing of the staff. It was a style that was very suitable for the nunchaku's fighting style. In just a few moments, the executives who charged at him were all slapped to the ground. Feng Bujue, who was fighting as he advanced, leaped over the bodies of the elite monsters. Since they were not dead bodies. He walked to Count William, the big boss of the scenario. I hear. Brother Ju titled his head and hung the nunchaku on one of his shoulders. He asked the Count like a rascal, "You want to kill me?" Even though his subordinates had all been knocked out and his opponent was right before him, Count William's expression did not change. Without a doubt, this was a powerful boss. At least, the power that Brother Ju had shown so far was not enough to make him panic. You're just an outsider. Facing the provocative question, Count William only replied with condescension. How dare you act so arrogantly before me? The second half of his sentence was laced with energy. His shout was like thunder in spring, and the sound waves were powerful. However, Feng Bujue, who was just one step away from him, acted like nothing had happened. He stood where he was and took the attack head-on. He did not move an inch, and his expression did not change. For a skill like this that was defined as a magical attack, with the special effect of the Seal's Wrath, Feng Bujue's equipment was able to nullify it. At this point in the scenario, Feng Bujue's equipment was already filled to the brim with mana points. This kind of magical attack could be nullified even if more than 10 of them came at him. You're trying to ambush me? Brother Ju looked at Count William and said with a ghost of a smile, "You're trying to show off your skills before Guan Yu, selling the Analects of Confucius in front of his door, and protecting the ball in front of Li Yi." Count William did not fully understand Brother Ju, so he answered instinctively, "What are you talking about?" "Oh." But just as he said that, he was kicked in the crotch by Feng Bujue. Then, he held his crotch and groaned like a rooster as he collapsed to the ground. Chapter 1454. February 14th, afternoon. Italy, somewhere in the outskirts of Tuscany. Feng Bujue, who was dressed in a suit, was standing at the door of a small church. He looked at the parking lot lazily, waiting for the guests who had yet to enter. Ruo Yu, who was wearing an off-shoulder bridesmaid dress, stood next to him. Although her posture was dignified, her makeup and her figure were flawless, her face had a killer's expression. Because the wedding was about to begin, the bride and groom were making the final preparations. There were not many guests who had yet to enter, so the job of welcoming the guests was done by the two groomsmen and bridesmaids. "I say, are you angry?" Since no one was passing by, Brother Ju simply leaned against the wall and turned to talk to Ruo Yu. "No." Ruo Yu said this, but her expression did not change. "Then why do you have such a scary expression?" Brother Ju asked again. "Ouch." Ruo Yu immediately sniffed and replied with one word, "Cold." This answer was very convincing. Feng Bujue slapped his forehead and thought to himself, "Why didn't I think of that? How about I hug you?" Brother Ju thought for a moment and asked, "Huh?" Ruo Yu glanced at him. Her eyes seemed to say, "Strange. I really want to put my coat on you, but the ceremony will start at any time. I have to be prepared, right?" Feng Bujue immediately explained. "When you went to the wedding banquet, did you see the groomsmen and bridesmaids hugging each other and standing at the door to welcome the guests?" Ruo Yu continued. "That's not true," Feng Bujue said, "but I know that there are often groomsmen and bridesmaids who sneak off to a deserted place before the end of the wedding." Before he could finish his sentence, a strong arm suddenly hooked around his shoulder. The man who suddenly appeared behind Brother Jew looked to be in his 20s. He had a head of long black hair. At least before he spoke, he gave off the air of a mysterious handsome man with long hair that reached his shoulders. Brat, why do you want to take my cute granddaughter to a place with no one around? Shui Yungu glared at Brother Jew from a distance that was so close to his face. With a bone-chilling tone and a kind smile, he asked Brother Jew such a question. Feng Bujue's flirting was interrupted by an elder. It was a bit awkward. Grandpa, why did you come out? Who's your grandfather? Shui Yunga's personality had not changed since he was a teenager. He was not as calm as Elder Cat. It would be more appropriate to call him a brat. Are you from my family? Yes, Brother Jew said, but I don't think it's very respectful for me to call you by your name. Hee. You can call me by my title, Shui Yunga said. Then what's your title? Feng Buju asked. Of course. Shui Yungu's smile became even friendlier. Of the 10 kings of hell, I'm the king of hell. He wasn't just talking nonsense. Since the age of 15, Shui Yungu had been one of the 10 kings of hell in the Ghost Hunter world. His spiritual power nickname was God Below, and he was the current inheritor and wielder of the original Water God Sword in the real world. As for his current strength, Guchun had mentioned that he was one of the 10 strongest spiritual ability users in the modern world. Grandpa, Yin, Brother Jew was under a lot of pressure. Even he couldn't help but speak incoherently. I think you've misunderstood my words. I'm just kidding. All right, you don't have to explain. As Shui Yunga spoke, he raised his other hand. Today, you're going to eat my Buddha's palm. Before he could finish his words, someone interrupted him. What plane? God your head, palm. The ones who interrupted him were 2 people. One was Guchun, and the other was Shao Tan's grandfather, who looked younger than Shao Tan himself. The 2 of them spoke one after another. From behind, each of them carried Shui Yungu up with one hand. While they were talking, they pulled Shui Yungu away. What are you doing? Let me go. I don't care. I'm going to kill him with one slap. Just like that, the king of hell was dragged back to the church, crying like a child. Ruo, you could only hold her forehead and shake her head when the elders in her family acted so rudely. She was speechless. Your ancestors, who cultivate immortality, claim to be the protector of humanity and the protector of peace. But from what I see, why do they all look like people who kill without batting an eyelid? Feng Bujua looked at the 3 people who were leaving. When they were far away, he spoke with a mocking tone. It's all right. They know what they're doing. They're just saying. Ruo Yu continued. Let's not talk about other things. Look, my dad is still alive. So, my father-in-law escaped from death back then? Brother Ju gasped in shock. Yes, he escaped death. Ruo Yu curled her lips. What do you mean by your father-in-law? Has he reached that step? That's true. Feng Bujua nodded. I don't think so. He paused for half a second, then said, Then, why don't you follow me for a few more steps? What kind of steps? Ruo Yu is not weak now. Quietly follow you to a place where there's no one around, right? You youngsters nowadays are so bold and unrestrained. Suddenly, a slightly old voice interrupted their conversation. Feng Li and Feng, you were also engrossed in their conversation. They were so engrossed in their flirting that they forgot the reason they were standing here. When they heard the voice and turned around, they discovered that a white-haired old man was already standing in front of them. The old man who teased them was a foreigner. One look at his face, and you could tell that he was a typical Germanic. However, he spoke fluent Chinese without any accent. Sorry, I didn't see you just now. Feng Bujua was thick-skinned after all. After the conversation was overheard, Ruo Yu's face turned red, and she lowered her head. However, Brother Ju still went forward and said to the old man without changing his expression, Hello. Thank you for coming from afar. Please come this way. Yes. Hearing this, the old man smiled and put his hand on Feng Bujua's shoulder. Young man, you're Feng Bujua, right? Oh, you know me? Feng Bujua replied. I heard old Wang and old Gu talk about you. The old man's Mandarin was authentic. It sounded like the old man in China. Not bad, not bad. Young and promising. He patted Feng Bujue's shoulder a few times. It's just that your level of shamelessness is still not as good as old Wang and old Goose when they were young. It'll be hard for you to get a girl like this. You have to work harder. After the old man said these words in Brother Ju's ear, he walked into the church, leaving behind a dumbfounded Brother Ju. He thought to himself, I actually lost in terms of being thick-skinned? What were those two guys like back then? How shameless were they? Were they even human? Chapter 1455. It was late at night. The wedding in the afternoon and the wedding banquet in the evening were still vivid in her mind. However, in the silence after the hustle and bustle subsided, these fresh memories could not resist the invasion of tiredness. At this time, Ruoyu had already fallen asleep under the blanket. Since they were on a private jet, Brother Ju and Ruoyu alone took up a small cabin near the front. There were not that many seats in the cabin, but the distance between them was wide. The seats themselves were different from the ones on a commercial plane. They were wide and comfortable. Ruoyu basically laid her seat flat and lay down to sleep. Feng Bujue sat next to Ruoyu's seat, which happened to be near the window. It was late at night, and most of the passengers on the plane were already asleep. After all, they were quite tired from playing during the day. However, Brother Ju was still looking at the night view of the stratosphere outside the window. He was not sleepy at all. Unknowingly, Xiao Tan has also gotten married. He muttered in his heart. He sounded like an old man. Whenever it was a time like this, people would become sentimental. As a scholar, Feng Bujue was no exception. In his impression, Xiao Tan was still a kind little kid. This silly kid always had an innocent smile on his face and followed behind him, calling him Brother Ju, Brother Ju. He was always so unsettling. It was as if he would fall or get lost if he turned around again if he walked faster. However, today, when Feng Bujue suddenly looked back, he realized that it was actually his own wishful thinking. Xiaodan was already an adult. He was a responsible man. He could take care of himself and the people he loved. When he realized it later, Wang Tanji was already ahead of Feng Bujue in both career and love. Xiaotan seemed to be using his actions to tell Brother Ju that there was no need to be too smart on the road of life. In fact, it was because many people were too smart that they ended up taking more detours and even got lost on those detours. Why aren't you sleeping? After some time, Ruoyu's gentle voice interrupted Feng Bujue's thoughts. As she asked, she retracted the back of the chair and sat up. I'm thinking, Feng Bujue replied without turning his head. He was still looking out of the window with his chin in his hand. What are you thinking about? Ruoyu asked. Thinking about life, Brother Ju replied weakly. PFFF. Unexpectedly, when Ruoyu heard this answer, she couldn't help but laugh. Her originally sleepy expression turned into a sneer. Hey, what kind of reaction is that? Feng Bujue finally turned around and asked with narrowed eyes. It's a normal reaction, Ruoyu replied with a smile. Is it funny that I'm thinking about life? Feng Bujue asked again. There's nothing funny about thinking about life. Ruoyu said, it's normal for people to think about life when they see a good friend getting married. But it's funny that you, Feng Bujue, are the same. Then Feng Bujue imitated Ruoyu's tone. What should I do? You should stare at her like a dead fish and say something like, Ruoyu imitated Brother Ju's usual sarcastic tone and said, sigh. Another good young man is pushed into the fire pit of marriage. His life is dark from now on. Feng Bujue listened and thought silently for a few seconds. Then he laughed. Yeah, that's me. But Ruoyu's smile disappeared at that moment. She saw a trace of bitterness in Feng Bujue's smile. Then, the sudden silence interrupted their conversation. I'm sorry. After a moment, Ruoyu returned to her usual tone and spoke again. Why do you have to apologize? Feng Bujue asked. I don't know how to say it. Ruoyu shook her head. She had never been good at expressing her inner feelings with words. She could not describe how she felt at that moment. Actually, you don't have to apologize. Fortunately, Feng Bujue did not need to say too much. He understood what she wanted to say. You're right. The Feng Bujue everyone knows, and The Feng Bujue I know should have reacted that way. He smiled again. Even I don't know what happened, but I've already changed. So, Ruo Yu probed. Now, you don't feel that your married life is dark anymore. Feng Bujue heard this and turned his head. He looked into Ruo Yu's eyes and said softly, "When I'm with you, nothing is dark." His words made Ruo Yu lower her head, not knowing what to do. But 2 seconds later, Brother Ju's expression suddenly changed. One side of his mouth curled up, revealing his standard sarcastic smile. "Did you think I would say that? Ha ha ha." His change in tone and laughter made Ruo Yu raise her head in surprise. "You're overthinking it." Feng Bujue continued in his most common annoying tone. "Speaking of which, we've already been married for a long time, haven't we? We live under the same roof, sleep in separate beds for a long time, and have a clear division of housework. We're already very used to and adapted to each other's pace of life. Occasionally, I'll tease you verbally, and you'll beat me up from time to time to train your body. This kind of life isn't dark, it's dark." When Brother Ju was halfway through his sentence, Ruo Yu's expression had already turned into a combination of a cold face and dead fish eyes. After he finished, Ruo Yu continued in a low voice. "I thought you had finally said something that was quite touching, but look what you said." Before she finished speaking, she had already flipped over and straddled Brother Ju's waist. Her hands reached out at the same time, instantly choking his neck. Because the seats on the plane were very spacious, her legs were just enough to trap Brother Ju on the inside of the two sides of the armrest. Feng Bujue, who was being choked by his neck, did not show any signs of weakness. He still spoke in a low voice. "You're angry out of embarrassment. When you received the bouquet at the wedding, I saw that there was something wrong with your expression. Just now, you were trying to trick me into proposing, right?" Xiaoling deliberately threw the bouquet at me. Ruo Yu increased the force of her grip and said fiercely, "It almost hit my face. Shouldn't I have caught it?" Ahem. Feng Bujue covered his neck with his hands and could still speak. "I'm just saying the truth. Damn it. To put it bluntly, what you care about the most is sleeping in separate beds, right?" Ruo Yu was also aggressive. Her strength was so great that Brother Ju had no room to fight back. "During the day, you beat around the bush. Do you really want to do it? Do you really want to do it? Do you want me to fulfill your wish right here?" Her words were said in a fit of anger, just like the words, "Do you want me to die in front of you right now?" when we quarreled. However, just as she said this, someone happened to open the cabin door and lift the curtain. He walked in from the back of the cabin. The person was none other than the old man who had overheard their conversation at the entrance of the church during the day. The old man's name was Albert. In terms of seniority, he should be Xiao Tan's grandfather's apprentice. However, he was slightly older than Xiao Tan's grandfather. At that moment, when Albert opened the cabin door and took half a step forward, Ruo Yu happened to say, "Do you really want to do it?" The old man pondered for a moment. This plane, the soundproofing was very good, and there was no one else in the cabin. So, 2 seconds later, Albert said expressionlessly, as if he was talking to himself, "I think I'd better go to the toilet at the back of the cabin." After saying that, the old man used a skill that was not inferior to the young man's and quickly retreated out of the door. He pulled the curtain back, closed the door, and even inserted the bolt to lock the door. Chapter 1456. Valentine's Day was also the New Year. It had only been a few days, but everyone's lives were back on track. Before the 7th day of the new year, Xiao Tan and Xiao Ling returned from Europe. Feng Bujue asked Xiao Tan why he didn't bring his wife on a honeymoon. Xiao Tan told him, "Actually, if you love the right person, you spend Valentine's Day every day." Then Brother Ju used a beautiful combo on Xiao Tan that you might not even see in a fighting game. Later, Feng Bujue heard from Ruo Yu that there were 2 reasons for this. First, most of the relatives and friends of the 2 families were present at the wedding. Everyone had a happy gathering, so they didn't have to visit relatives this year. Second, around the end of the year, the probability of all kinds of supernatural phenomena would increase greatly. This meant that Gyoko would be very busy. Therefore, Xiao Tan, who had just joined Jioku as an intern, was called back by Chief Gu. He followed Bao Qing and Qi Ji to practice learning. After saying these two objective reasons, Ruo Yu added, "Besides, as long as the couple is in love, every day is a honeymoon." Haven't you heard of the saying, actually, if you love the right person, you spend Valentine's Day every day? Feng Bujue heard this and immediately complained. When you guys said this line so confidently, you should know that you're just quoting the lyrics, right? And that song is called Happy Breakup. Also, you're the one who has the least right to quote this sentence, okay? You haven't broken a seal, so why are you talking about love with me? After he said that, Ruo Yu used a beautiful combo that you might not even see in a fighting game. In short, the new year passed in such a harmonious atmosphere. During the Lunar New Year, the Dream Company was closed from New Year's Eve to the 6th day of the Lunar New Year, as announced in advance. Originally, Feng Bujue didn't think there was anything wrong with the game company taking a holiday during the New Year. However, after talking to Ruo and considering what she said, the probability of all kinds of supernatural phenomena happening around the end of the year will greatly increase. This holiday seemed more reasonable. No matter what, at midnight on the 7th day of the new year, Thriller Paradise, Crazy Thoughts, and Dream Company's online shops reopen on time. At the same time, the announcement that was released at the end of last month and had been on the front page of the official website, the preliminary rules for Thriller Paradise's tournament for the Best S3 will be announced after the new year, was finally replaced. What replaced? It was an explanation of the tournament for the Best S3, the mixed individual and team long-distance competition system that all the major studios had been pondering for nearly a month had finally surfaced. Just like the previous two times, the competition format this time surprised everyone once again. First, the players had to form a team to participate in S3. Each team was limited to 7 people, and there were no substitutes. Secondly, there was no preliminary round for S3, or rather, the preliminary round had already started at a time that no one was aware of. It was almost a year after the game was released that the Dream Company announced a shocking setting. Actually, since the earliest closed beta, Thriller Paradise had a built-in hidden score mechanism. This mechanism would give each character a score based on their performance in the scenario. And this score that the players themselves had no idea about, was one of the important factors of the system used to generate the scenario. In other words, it was directly related to the difficulty of the scenario that the player was assigned to. The hidden score was different from the player combat ability ranking and the later overall player ability ranking. For example, a level 1 player killing a strengthened zombie with his bare hands, and a level 50 player using everything he had to fight a mini-boss solo. Other factors like level, equipment, and skill aside, the difficulty was similar from the perspective of the players involved. Even though from the perspective of combat ability and overall ability, the two players were far apart, the hidden score that they would get would not be that different. Other than that, the hidden score was calculated based on the average score and not the total score. It did not mean that the more scenarios one cleared, the more points one would get. Based on the Dream Company's attitude, this score was the most accurate way for the system to judge a player's overall ability, because it had nothing to do with equipment or skill. It was purely based on the player's performance. Of course, the players who were high on the ranking would not have a low hidden score. Even if a large part of a professional player's actual ability could be supported by a studio, if the player's ability was not good enough, naturally, they would not get so many resources. Then, turning back to the fact that there was no preliminary round, it was easier to explain. Different from the previous two competitions where there was a threshold and a preliminary round, this time, as long as one crossed the threshold, they would enter the semifinals. And the threshold was the total hidden score of the 7 players in a team is more than 500. As long as a team fulfilled this condition, they would enter the elimination round directly. What kind of concept was this 500 points? Based on the data released by the Dream Company, excluding the players below level 10 whose score was still unstable, the average hidden score of the players in Thriller Paradise was 62 points. As long as one's hidden score was higher than this, they would be considered to be above average. Looking at it this way, even if there were 7 players who were above average, the total hidden score of the team would be 434 points. Of course, that was not enough to qualify for the competition. To participate in S3, the average hidden score of the 7 players in a team had to be at least 71. 43 points. Since the hidden score was not counted as a decimal point, it was basically 72 points per person. Compared to S1 and S2, the threshold this time was in a way lower. If there was someone in a team with a very high hidden score, for example, someone with a hidden score of more than 100 points, then the requirement for the rest of the team would be relatively relaxed. This allowed those with a hidden score of less than 72 to participate. After the threshold, it was time to move on to the competition format. The competition format of S3 was very simple. It was a knockout competition. In every round, all the participating teams would face off against each other in pairs. The losing team would be directly eliminated, while the winning team would advance to the next round. The last remaining team would naturally be the champion. The matchup was completely random. In other words, even though the probability was low, there was still the possibility of regulation versus Brahmin in the first round. Also, if there were an odd number of teams in any round, then after the random matchup, the team that was left behind would automatically advance to the next round. Such a rule undoubtedly increased the chance of a lot of accidents. It was very likely that the strong professional teams under the workshop would encounter each other in the first round, and one of them would be eliminated, while some teams of casual players would rely on defeating opponents who were weaker than them, or get a bye, to go further than the strong teams. Regarding this, the major gaming studios would have some complaints, but on the other hand, the majority of players would be happy to see this happen. There was a type of game in this world that relied on squeezing 1% of the money out of the hardcore players. The gameplay of this type of game was secondary. The player's experience was completely dependent on the amount of money invested into the game. Other than those who had invested a large amount of money into the game, the remaining 99% of casual players were one of the features provided by the gaming company for the hardcore players. For games like this, the gaming company did not need to consider the casual player's experience or opinion. After all, after raking in some quick cash, they would close the server, change their shell, and release a new game. But Thriller Paradise was not that kind of game. After the competition between S1 and S2, the Dream Company realized a problem. In the competition, the sense of participation of the normal players was too low. Based on the previous competition format, most of the non-professional players would have been eliminated in the preliminary round. Other than the extreme exception like Underworld Frontline, the other casual players, be it individual or team, even if they entered the semi-finals, they would be eliminated in the first round. In other words, from the semi-finals onward, the competition had become a battle between the various gaming studios and the professional players. Even though this was normal, and the players liked to watch these kinds of high-level competitions, the Dream Company still felt that changes had to be made. Therefore, this new competition format, on the basis of ensuring that the standard of the participating players was higher than average, gave the 99% of casual players a lot of room to perform. The principle of the strongest team will win did not change. The difference was, this time, all kinds of teams, casual players, and weirdos who had trouble advancing to the next round under the previous format had a chance to enter the competition. Finally, let's talk about the actual format of the competition. The tournament for the best was like its name. Starting from S1, the main theme of the competition was combat, and this year was no exception. S3 would use a dual format similar to S1's Battle of the Butterfly and the format of the team tennis tournament. In other words, there would be 3 rounds of singles and 2 rounds of doubles. Best of 5. The first round would be a 1v1 Vanguard battle. The second round would be a 2v2 Backbone battle. The third round would return to the 1v1 format, and it would be called the General Battle. At this point, if one team had won 3 rounds, then the competition would be over, and there would be no need for the next 2 rounds. If there was still no winner, then the fourth round would be the 2v2 Lieutenant Battle. If the first 4 rounds ended in a 2v2 tie, Then there would be the last round, the general battle. In that case, 7 people would be needed to complete the 5 rounds. Other than that, even though the order of the 5 rounds was fixed, the position of the members could be changed every round. For example, the vanguard in this round could be the general in the next round, or they could play in the doubles. There were no restrictions. However, the lineup for each round had to be submitted within 10 minutes before the start of the competition. Once the lineup was confirmed, it could not be changed. At this point, a lot of people had probably thought of this. Everyone had heard of the story of Tianji's horse racing. If one could guess the opponent's lineup before the competition, then it was not impossible for the weaker team to defeat the stronger team. Similar to S2, the matchups for each round would be announced the day before the competition. This was the time for both teams to engage in information warfare and lineup games. That was pretty much the first round of information about the tournament for the best S3 that the Dream Company had announced. This time, the first thing Feng Bujue did was to go through the related rules, but after he finished reading it, a problem appeared before his eyes. Underworld Frontline currently only had 6 members, so where was he supposed to find the 7th member? Chapter 1457, February 22nd, 1 o'clock in the morning, in the game world, in Su Huaishan's conference room. Because they had agreed to discuss matters related to S3 that night, everyone from Underworld Frontline had arrived early. Feng Bujue, who was rarely on time, was the last to show up. Everyone. Brother Ju saw everyone looking in his direction as soon as he entered the room, so he raised his hand and pointed behind him, saying, "Let me introduce." At the same time, the conference room door closed and opened again. Then, a person followed Feng Bujue into the room. "This is the new member I told everyone about before." Brother Ju's words followed the appearance of the person. Snow. Snow's image in the game was the same as his appearance in real life. He had a typical Chinese and European face, but overall, he looked more like an Asian and his hair was also black. "Hi, everyone." Snow greeted everyone in the conference room with a smile. He seemed to be in a good mood. "Hello, Xiao Tan was a straightforward person. Since everyone greeted him with a smile, he smiled and prepared to introduce himself. But to his surprise, Feng Bujue suddenly waved his hand and blocked his way. "There's no need for that. Everyone here has entered the semi-finals of S2. He will know you even if you don't introduce yourselves." He paused. "Also, you don't have to be too polite to Snow." As he spoke, he went over and put his arm around Snow's shoulder. "Just treat him like a second-class citizen. In the future, he'll be the scapegoat and he'll be the one to die, huh?" Brother Snow's tolerance was indeed different from ordinary people. Being bullied by Brother Ju in public, he just smiled and said, Yes, seniors, you don't have to treat me like an outsider." To be able to with Brother Feng. At this point, he seemed to feel that it was a little inappropriate. So he added, "And compete with everyone. I'm already very honored. Looks like there's something going on between the two of you." And Yueqin said to the two of them in a meaningful tone. She looked at them like a fujoshi. Yes, to be able to be pulled in by Bujue to become the 7th person, she is definitely not someone to be trifled with. There must be something wrong with this attitude of treating her like a concubine. Ruoyu also put on a thoughtful expression and purposely mocked her. Since the two of you are talking about this topic, I might as well mention it. As Feng Bujue spoke, he had already raised his hand to let go of Snow. Brother Snow claims to be bisexual. When he said the word love, Brother Ju stretched out his hand again and slowly pushed Snow away from his side. According to my observations, what he said is true. Feng Bujue tilted his head. So if he does anything out of line to you in the future, please use the reporting system and call the police if necessary. Hey, are you serious? Xiao Tan heard this and narrowed his eyes. As the only straight man in the room other than Brother Ju, it was natural for him to be a little nervous when he heard something like this. Don't worry, Brother Xiao Tan, I am a person with integrity. I have no interest in married people. A second later, Snow smiled and said to Xiao Tan and Xiao Ling, who was standing beside him, other than that. Then he turned his gaze to Ruoyu, Missin, and Goddess Su. To be honest, Even though the few of you are very beautiful, none of you are my cup of tea. Speaking of this, he took out a few photos from his pocket and showed them to everyone. I prefer this type of woman. If any of you have friends like this in your life, why don't you introduce them to me? At this time, everyone, including Brother Jew, came forward curiously and looked at the photos. In the photos, all of them were women who looked bullier than men. There were women of all skin colors and nationalities. The key was that these photos were all two-person photos. Snow was in every one of them, and his eyes and postures when he was taking photos with the sisters were very intimate. After looking at the photos, Fong Bujue looked at Snow with a complicated expression. Your taste is really unique. At this moment, Brother Jew finally figured out some things that he didn't understand on Solomon. He was very puzzled at that time. Why was Snow always accompanied by a few strong men? Even the task of serving tea was done by those in black suits. Logically speaking, as long as Snow was an underground prince, as long as he appeared, it would be normal for him to be surrounded by a few beautiful women. Now, seeing him take out those photos, Brother Jew's thoughts were suddenly enlightened. Of course, there were some things that Snow didn't say. In fact, at least before the age of 18, Snow didn't realize that his taste for women was different from the aesthetic standards of the public. After all, he grew up in a luxurious environment, and the people around him all instilled the idea that that kind of woman is a beauty in him. But since Snow became an adult and realized his other sexual orientation, he suddenly liberated his mind and discovered his true preferences. Snow smiled as he put away the photos. It's okay, he said, taking half a step toward Fong Bujue. But my taste for men is more general. You little brat, stay away from me. Fong Bujue immediately interrupted him and took half a step back. Okay. Snow shrugged. Anyway, thank you very much for letting me join the Hell Frontline. I will definitely perform well in the competition. What do you mean by perform well? Unexpectedly, Brother Jew choked again. It means when no matter what, you are the person I recommended, so you must be prepared to die in every game. If we don't win the championship in the end, it will be your responsibility. At that time, you can only swallow your own feces and commit suicide to appease the world. Snow is also shocked. This is really a scapegoat. I'm here, I'm going to die, cut the crap. First, put the information projection on the conference table for everyone to see, Fong Bujue said. I'm going to practice with the wooden stakes for a while. After saying this, he really took out his nunchucks and ran to the side to hit the training dummies. The system provided the decoration of the conference room. Su Huaishan's conference room had many such training facilities, and Snow was very obedient. He immediately ran to the conference table and showed his character information in front of the seniors. Snow, level 50 title, Cyber Gambler, title ability, Evil Luck, experience points, 437600050000, skill points, 124, game coins, 999999000. Mastery, general ability A, workmanship A, sleuthing D, fighting C, marksmanship D, medic D, sorcery D, summoning B, inventory, 2850 purified water, bottle, *20, steel cube, *29, stone scorpion's egg, *12, universal screw, nut, *182, magical orb, *21, aura crystal, *43, horn of Milos, *3, tears of Xidigarba, *4, creeper's gland, *9, raccoon's tail, *3, adhesive, small bottle, *76, super adhesive, small bottle, *26, molten core package, *5, unicorn's horn powder, *2, triangular copper, block, *41, woven fruit, *14. There are also 20 bottles of survival point supplements, large, medium, and small. Because only 5 bottles of supplements can occupy one inventory space, they are not listed here repeatedly. Equipment, Devil's Dice, sorcery weapon, WJQ, 308 military shovel, indestructible type, sandbox dweller's hammer, cyborg psychic intimidator's mask, hacker's hand, optical camouflage belt, secondary arc reactor, genetic forger's set, includes breastplate, greaves, shoulder pads, boots of choice. Skill tab, 1515, Construct Summoning, Cybertron Warrior. Construct Summoning, Format Creature. Construct Summoning, Runaway Experiment. Construct Summoning, Universal Parts. Construct Summoning, Unique Parts. Construct Summoning, Demigod Machinery. Construct Summoning, Dream Machinery. Construct Summoning, King of the Mountain Road. Summon, Z-Virus Infected. Summon, Underworld Warrior. VR Vision. Energy Shield. Armor Transformation. Mana Transformation. Craftsman's Spirit. In addition to the items listed above, Snow's storage room had many spare skills and some consumables related to those skills. After everyone had browsed through Snow's situation, Xiaoling was the first to speak. It looks like you've spent quite a lot of money playing this game. Xiaoling, who often visited auctions and shops and had an excellent memory, had a better understanding of the value of the items in Snow's inventory. Basically, Snow's inventory was filled with items created by the Machinery Mastery or consumables for the Summoning Mastery to summon creatures. Many of them were general items for high-level skills, so their value was naturally not low. Furthermore, Snow's number of game coins, the upper limit of his inventory and skill tab, all showed that he did not hesitate to spend money when it came to topping up his game. Yes, once Xiaoling said that, Snow was embarrassed. I am ashamed to say this. From a very beginning, I brought my experience of playing other games into Thriller Paradise and messed up some things. Then he told them about how he had been looking for people to help him level up before he reached level 40. Then he added, when I finally understood, I was already level 40. Even though I had collected quite a number of skills and equipment, due to my low mastery level, most of them could not be used. In that case, when I was in a direct battle, my combat ability was much lower than other players of the same level. I could not even protect myself. Basically, when I joined a team, I was a burden. Hearing this, Su Huaishang added, therefore, you chose Workmanship Mastery, a mastery that could be supported by money and could be improved outside of the scenario. Yes, Snow nodded and added, I first spent a high price to buy a military shovel called WJQ 308, which is a must-have for Workmanship Mastery players. Then I bought a large number of blueprints from the auction house and collected the materials needed to create the items from both the shop and the auction house. I spent several days in the meeting room to work on the items. When I raised my mastery to level B, I could already create some stronger combat items to protect myself. It was then that I started to queue for solo scenarios. After 2 levels, all my mastery levels increased, and I gained quite a lot of skill points. Therefore, I went to the Thriller box to buy some skills and equipment that were suitable for me. After strengthening myself, I went to queue for team mode, and it became much more popular. No one said that I was a burden anymore, and they all wanted to be my friend. They just wanted to ride the coattails of the rich. Feng Bujue, who was not far away, did not forget to chime in with a sharp comment. Huh, Snow chuckled awkwardly. Of course, I understand that. That kind of person, after adding you as a friend, he will pretend to chat with you and say some nice things. When he feels that he's gotten to know you better, he will start to ask you for this and that and make all kinds of demands. If you refuse, he will curse you behind your back and hate you in his heart. People like that who have the logic of, why don't you give me some when I'm so rich, and think that everyone in the world owes him something. I have seen too many of them. When he said that, even though there was a smile on his face, the dark aura of a host had already surfaced between his brows. When it came to reading people, other than Feng Bujue, Snow was probably better than anyone else there. In the games that he had organized, he had seen too much of the depravity and ugliness of human nature. Among all the living beings, it was rare to find someone who could maintain a noble attitude at the last moment. It was because of this reason that Snow valued Feng Bujue so much. Before Snow finished his sentence, Ruoyu opened her mouth to mock him in a Feng Bujue-style manner. This is the reason why you came here to be a second-class citizen. Snow really did think about this question and replied, yes. When Ruoyu heard that, she glanced at her companions. Everyone had a ghost of a smile in their eyes. All right, Welcome to Underworld Frontline. Chapter 1458. As the old saying goes, the first month is the new year. Of course, that was an old saying. For most people, the new year was equivalent to a holiday, and the holiday would probably end on the third day of the new year. At most, it would allow you to rest until the 8th day of the new year. Even the students who were on winter break would have to start school again around the Lantern Festival. Therefore, in the eyes of modern people, the second half of the first month was a very normal day for people to do whatever they needed to do. However, the 7 people from Underworld Frontline did not need to consider that. They either did not have fixed working hours or did not work at all. There was also a professional player who had not signed a contract. His job was to play games. In short, these people had plenty of time to be online. In order to prepare for S3, everyone was quite serious. Even Miss, who had to work in the company during the day, thought of a way to adjust her working hours. Actually, she just told her family that she would only work half a day from tomorrow onwards. She could decide her working hours by herself, so that she could play games with her teammates during the day and improve their teamwork. According to the announcement released by the Dream Company, the registration time for S3 was 1 month. The registration time was the moment S3's competition format was announced, which was midnight on February 21st, 2056. At midnight on March 20th, 2056, the registration system would close. At that time, the system would immediately randomly match all the registered teams and generate a list of opponents for the first round of S3. 24 hours after the list was announced, the first round of the competition would officially begin. Just like the previous 2 competitions, this 1-month registration time was no doubt the game company's scheme to make money. Needless to say, the upper-class players who were definitely going to participate in the competition would definitely invest more. When everyone was throwing money to increase their strength, if you still maintained your usual pace, it would be equivalent to regressing. With this trend, the trade volume of the official market and the auction house would definitely soar. Not only could the Dream Company recover a large amount of game coins from the players, but it could also earn a large percentage of transaction taxes and service fees during this period of time when the prices of the auction house were increasing. In addition, the income from the extra top-up of casual players was also the focus of this operation. In the current Thriller Paradise, most of the players were casual players who were between level 45 and 50 and had hidden points between 55 and 75. This group of players usually played the game for the sake of relaxation, excitement, fun, and friendship. They entered the game early, and their online time was fixed, but they did not have a strong desire to increase their in-game character's power. Since Thriller Paradise would generate scenarios that were suitable for the hidden segments based on the player's skill level, dedication, and personality, whether the player was above average or not would not affect their gaming experience, with the exception of people like Snow, who had to rely on others to level up until level 40. But now, the situation was different. S3's completely random matchmaking rules greatly increased the chances of normal players advancing. Theoretically speaking, if there was an extreme phenomenon of all the professional players' advancement paths converging before the semifinals, then it wasn't impossible for a commoner team to become the runner-up. With this kind of stimulation, the casual players' enthusiasm for S3 was at an all-time high. However, everyone understood that this kind of theory was just a theory. It was similar to after the World Cup qualifier groups were completed, the football fans first did some mental calculations and then felt that the national football team could theoretically qualify this time. That kind of mentality, but no matter what, humans had dreams. Furthermore, Thriller Paradise did not require registration fees, so there was nothing to lose by participating. If they lost, they would just be kicked out of the game, and if they won, they could brag about it for half a year. The Dream Company grasped this mentality and purposely set aside this 1 month to allow those players who did not have enough hidden points to increase their points. As long as the casual players stayed in the game longer and got serious, changing their mentality, their hidden points could indeed increase in a short period of time. And once they started to play the game seriously, it was normal to invest some money into it. After all, Thriller Paradise was a game with a financial and age threshold. Most of the players in this kind of game had the ability to spend money. It was just a matter of how much money they had. If there was a book, it would be long. If there was no book, it would be short. In the following month, nothing special happened. The members of Underworld Frontline steadily increased their strength. During this period, Fong Bujue still played solo most of the time because the other 6 members could form a team. Furthermore, it had to be said that Brother Ju was indeed a cancer to the team. When he was in the team, increasing the difficulty of the scenario was one thing, but the key was that many of his strategies would affect the normal flow of the scenario. Therefore, Fong Bujue still played solo for most of the time. Of course, be it solo or in a team, Brother Ju did not mind. He could handle any mode, any scenario, but there was one situation that made him feel strange. And that was, as mentioned earlier, nothing special happened. For Fong Bujue, this was the strangest thing that had ever happened. Just as the end of this gamble was coming at the end of this candidate game, everything was so peaceful. Woody himself did not come to contact him, and he did not send Molly Kue, Arthas, to tell him anything. Vincent, Simon, and the rest did not come to contact him. The people from heaven did not do anything either. Not only in the real world, even in the game world, it was the same. Ever since the battle to protect the Monster Kingdom, in the past month, including the other members of Underworld Frontline, Fong Bujue and the rest did not queue for a scenario set in the main universe of Thriller Paradise. But from a reaction on the forum, the system did not stop generating scenarios set in the main universe, because other players had participated in them. Brother Ju tried to team up with players outside his guild and queued for various scenarios on Nightmare difficulty, but he could not get any. There was no way for him to enter the main universe, and there was no chance for him to enter the inner world. He had not even run into a single anomaly. The Thriller Paradise that Fong Bujue had played this month was so normal that it made him wonder if he had opened it the wrong way. And this phenomenon made Fong Bujue understand that this time, something big was going to happen. There is no need to mention the existences in the game world, but even Woody and the other gods and demons could not send a message. This meant that there was an even more powerful force that had intervened and taken control of the situation. Chapter 1459. On the 20th of March, at midnight, the registration for S3 ended on time. Most of the teams had already submitted their registration applications days ago. The teams that were the latest to register had already completed their registration on the 19th. There was no such thing as a team that waited until 11 p.m. on the 19th to collect enough hidden points to register. At midnight, all the participating players received a system notification informing them of the number of teams and their matchups for the first round. This time, a total of 26,705 teams had successfully passed the hidden points threshold and registered for the competition. Therefore, in the first round, there would be 26,704 teams facing off against each other. Among them, 13,352 teams would be eliminated, and one team would be lucky enough to advance along with the remaining 13,352 teams. The competition would start one day later, at midnight on the 21st. After the first round, there would be a day of rest. At midnight on the 22nd, the officials would announce the matchups for the next round. Then on the 23rd, the second round would begin. After that, every round would follow the same rules until the champion was decided. Aside from the fact that the team would be eliminated, if they wanted to be the champion, they would need to win 15 matches in a row within 30 days. On the other hand, if they lost any match before the 15th match, they would be eliminated. From the perspective of the competition system, this kind of random matchup did not require any calculation of points. There was no way to predict the route of advancement in advance. This saved a lot of trouble for the data analysis team of many gaming studios. Of course, they couldn't stop analyzing the information. Even if their opponent in the next round was an unknown party made up of casual players, they couldn't be careless. They still had to investigate. No matter what, the hidden total points of the other party's party was over 500, so they couldn't be too weak. The night of the 20th, Su Huaishang's meeting room. Underworld Frontline was ready to go. Please note, the first round of the Pinnacle Tournament S3 will begin in 10 minutes, game time. At that moment, everyone received a voice notification and a dialog box notification. Because the time ratio in sleep mode was 1:10, the players in the game world only received the notification when it was already 11:59 p.m. in the real world. 1 minute after the game ended, another system notification popped up. Please submit your team's lineup within the next 9 minutes. If you don't submit the relevant information within the time limit, your team's lineup will be randomly arranged by the system. Feng Bujua muttered to himself. He glanced at his teammates and said, "Then, I'll hand it in according to what we discussed earlier." He quickly received confirmation from his teammates. Then he submitted the list of players for the first round. Vanguard Battle. Snow, Battle of the Pillars, Wang Tanji, Laughing Soul General Battle, Su Huaishang, Deputy General Battle, Like Rain Among the Flowers on the Stone Grey General. Feng Bujua, since Underworld Frontline, will be facing a team made up of anonymous casual players in the first round. The strength and specialty of each member was unknown. Therefore, Brother Ju used a more conventional lineup for this battle. Based on Feng Bujua's analysis, a casual player's team would normally have two formations. The first was the conventional balance type, which would start from the weakest to the strongest to ensure that there would be a stable fighting force in each round. The other was the top-heavy type, which would send out the third, second, and first strongest members of the team in the first 3 rounds to try to end the match with a score of 3 o'clock. From a tactical perspective, the top-heavy type of lineup was more sneaky. If the opponent used the conventional balance type of lineup, they might be overwhelmed by this kind of horse racing tactic. However, this kind of sneaky tactic naturally came with a corresponding risk. If there was a mistake in any of the first 3 rounds, then the top-heavy team would basically be finished. This was because the members that they placed in the last 2 rounds were the weakest, and they would not be able to deal with the enemy's strongest members. Other than that, there was a high chance that 2 top-heavy teams would run into each other. In that case, it would be no different from 2 conventional balanced teams. In the most extreme case, there might be a third formation that specifically targeted the top-heavy type of lineup. That was to place their strongest lineup in the first round to take out the third strongest lineup of the top-heavy team. Then, in the second and third rounds, they would use their second and third strongest lineups to take out the 2 weakest lineups of the enemy in the fourth and fifth rounds. In conclusion, in a situation where the ability of both teams was close to each other, the difference in formation could indeed decide the outcome of the battle. And in this game, it was not only a psychological battle. Intelligence and luck were also very important. Feng Bujua was a cautious person. He had placed Su Huaishang in the Battle of the Champions because he had made up his mind. Even if there was a 1 in a billion chance that they would run into an unknown, hidden team, and the whole team was made up of top players, and they were arranged in a top-heavy formation, and they managed to defeat Underworld Frontline in the first and second matches, then it would not be that big of a deal. Because looking at the whole of Thriller Paradise, the number of people who had the chance to defeat Su Huaishang in a one-on-one battle could be counted on one hand. Brother Ju knew all of them. In any case, they were not in the team that day. Considering this, even in the worst-case scenario, the chance of them winning was still greater than 50%. In reality, for Underworld Frontline's opponents, when they saw the first round's match list, the worst-case scenario had already arrived. How could there be so many hidden strong players in the world? Underworld Frontline was just a team with an average hidden score of 75. A few friends had gathered together to participate in the competition. Initially, they were quite excited, but when they saw their opponent, the previous champion, that feeling, it was truly a reflection of the saying, dying before the start of the battle will make heroes weep. If not for the chance to fight Goddess Su, these few would have given up already. 10 minutes passed quickly. At midnight, the system announcement announced, "The competition is about to start. Please prepare to teleport." Then there was a countdown of 10 seconds. When the countdown ended, the players dissolved into light and disappeared from the conference room. This could be said to be a big change that was implemented in this competition. Before this, when the players wanted to teleport to any scenario, they had to return to their own elevator, but this time, they could teleport together in the conference room. Unfortunately, this kind of service was not supported during normal dungeons. Download complete. Tournament for the best S3, first round. Venue, Cell Gaming Hall. Compared to the previous two competitions, the loading announcement this time was much simpler. When the announcement ended, Snow was already standing on a ring. This was a square ring that was about 30 meters long. It was made up of many 1-meter square bricks. From the top, it looked like a chessboard. There was a pillar at each of the 4 corners of the ring. The shape of the pillar was similar to a Western knight's lance, but it was much thicker than a real knight's lance. Around the ring was a wasteland. Looking out, there were only hills and some weeds. The sky was blue and white, and the sun was shining brightly. You have entered spectator mode. Several seconds later, other than the 2 players in the first round, everyone else heard this announcement. At that moment, the members of the 2 teams were teleported into 2 transparent rectangular containers. These 2 cubes floated in the air on both sides of the field, and they could see the competition on the ring from a bird's eye view. Attention! The spectator space is not on the same plane as the battlefield. Players on the battlefield are unable to communicate with their teammates in the spectator space. This meant that the person who was fighting could not see, hear, or touch the transparent cubes. Therefore, the players in the cubes did not have to try to help their teammates by shouting or doing anything else. The competition will start in 30 seconds. Immediately after, the system gave the next announcement. In the ring, Snow and his opponent, Thunder King, were already rubbing their fists and getting ready to fight. This 30 seconds of preparation time was, of course, useful. During this time, the 2 players would be separated by a transparent barrier. Regardless of whether it was the players themselves or other objects, it was definitely impossible to pass through the barrier. However, it was possible to take advantage of this time to release some skills in advance. This was especially true for players like Snow, who specialized in machinery and summoning. These 30 seconds were precious. Snow's brain was not slow. He instantly understood the meaning of the preparation time. As soon as the system's announcement ended, he took out a bunch of materials from his inventory and started to tinker with them with his Sandbox Dweller's Hammer and WJQ 308 military shovel. Although his summoning skills were not bad, his main skill was still machinery. The only passive skill that he had equipped was Spirit of the Smith. Its special effect was to increase the various abilities of machinery creations and increase the production speed of such creations. In less than half a minute, Snow had already created something from a bunch of metals, parts, bonding adhesives, and some strange materials. Name: Construction Skill, King of the Mountain Road. Skill Card Type: Active Skill, Permanent. Skill Type: Machinery. Effect: Create a high-performance land-carrying vehicle. Consumption: During the manufacturing process, 5 stamina points will be lost every 10 seconds. No less than 10 kilograms of metal. No less than 5 joining parts. Other parts can be added as required. Learning requirement: Machinery Mastery. Remark: I have a friend who owns a car repair shop. Every time he finishes repairing someone's car, there will be an extra small box of parts that he does not know how to put back. One day, I told him that when he has accumulated enough parts, he will be able to piece together a new car. So, he really started to store those parts. Until one day, he finally collected enough parts, and then he was arrested. So, I always say that there are risks involved in modifying vehicles. A low-key old driver. Although this skill looked like it was just average, when it was actually used, there's a lot of room for manipulation and potential. Under the premise of satisfying the consumption of the skill, the things that Snow could create could be smaller ones like skateboards, unicycles, and bicycles. Bigger ones could be cars, sports cars, and trucks. Bigger ones could be tanks, maglev trains, mobile fortresses. This skill did not have any cooldown time restrictions. Anyway, as long as he had enough stamina and materials, he could start building at any time. He could build as big as he wanted. He could even build the same thing several times. Right now, Snow had used around 20 seconds to build an exquisitely designed motorcycle. 5, 4, 3. When there were 5 seconds left before the start of the battle, the system voice started to count down. At this time, Snow had already gotten on the motorcycle, facing in the opposite direction of his opponent, and started the motorcycle. Brother Thunder, whose ID was Thunder King, was also dumbfounded. He thought to himself, this guy, is he preparing to run away? 2, 1, fight! With the shout of fight, the barrier between the two disappeared. But 2 seconds before the barrier disappeared, Snow had already ridden away on the motorcycle. It could be said that he fully understood the meaning of the 30-second rule. Why did the system only set up a barrier between the two players, but not restrict them from going to the area behind them? It was very simple. It was to give the players who used stealth ambush or long-range sniping as their fighting style, as well as the players who wanted to use other roundabout tactics, a period of time to distance themselves. Of course, although the battlefield was big, there was still a limit. Moreover, the judgment of AFK-like play was also there. Without these two restrictions, the side who had the upper hand in terms of mobility would run toward the endless sunset. This match would be endless. Looking at Snow's back, Thunder King thought to himself, I didn't expect this. He just stood there, waiting blankly. It was not that he did not want to chase after him, but he really could not catch up. Thunder King was a very traditional player who specialized in fighting. His combat power was not bad, but he had a shortcoming. That was his slow speed. If you asked him to chase after a person, he might not even be able to catch up, let alone chase after a motorcycle. He won't be judged as AFK-like play, right? Looking at the figures standing blankly on the battlefield, Xiao Tan, who was in the spectator space, could not help but think. If they want to judge, they should judge the one who turned around and ran away, not the one who stood there and waited, Feng Bujue continued. That's right. Xiao Ling also said, chasing after the opponent who rode on a vehicle on foot is obviously at a disadvantage. Even if you can catch up, it will consume a lot of your stamina. So, the opponent standing there and waiting for orders is a very correct judgment and response. If this is considered as AFK-like play, then it is unfair. Just as they were talking, Thunder King had already sat down on the battlefield and muttered, Phew, then I'll just wait here. Anyway, you were the one who ran away first, so you have to come back. If you don't do anything, you will be judged as an AFK-like play first. His idea was not wrong, but Snow, who was planning to build a missile silo, did not seem to need to come back. Chapter 1460. After leaving the ring, Snow drove the motorcycle and sped all the way. He also scattered some spider beacons that he had made before the match along the way. The appearance of these beacons was similar to mechanical spiders, and they could indeed crawl like spiders. They were very small in size and moved very quickly. Even on a bare concrete floor, one had to look carefully to notice them. If they were in a place with weeds or sand, then most of them could only be discovered by special vision abilities. This was also one of the advantages of a player who specialized in workmanship. Some of the permanent gadgets that could be put into a backpack could be made and brought in before the match. They could take them out and use them immediately. As for the use of these beacons, we'll talk about it later. Let's talk about Snow first. He drove for more than 10 kilometers. Of course, in terms of time, only 10 minutes had passed. Then, he saw the border of the battlefield. Although the border barrier was transparent when the sun shone on it, it would refract a variety of halos. So, this invisible wall could be seen from far away. Soon, Snow came to the side of the barrier, stopped the motorcycle, and reached out to touch the transparent force field. Then, he received the relevant system prompt. Since he had confirmed that he could not widen the distance any further, Snow did not delay any further. He immediately flipped over and got off the motorcycle, activating the Construct summoning skill, Cybertron Warrior. As the name implied, this skill could summon a transformer. Seeing this, did you think that characters like Optimus Prime and Megatron were about to appear? People who thought this way were obviously too young. for warriors like Optimus Prime and Shockwave. They had to be at least grade A and had certain special conditions or skills that consumed a lot of energy to summon them. For characters like Megatron and Six-Faced Beast, they had to be summoned with grade S skills. As for things like the Great Emperor of the Universe and Heavenly Lord Yuan-Shi, just think about it and don't think too much about it. Right now, Snow's skill was only a B-grade double specialization skill. The so-called Cybertron Warrior was actually just a random warrior-type Cybertron person summoned. However, because he had equipped the passive skill Craftsman's Spirit, the skill's effect had increased. So, in a few cases, he could randomly summon warriors like Steel Whip and Flying Fire. Creak, 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 creak. Accompanied by a strange sound of transformation, an ordinary Cybertron warrior appeared in front of Snow. It seemed that his luck today was just SOS, as he did not summon a character with a name. But it didn't matter. He hadn't planned on having this character fight in the first place. The advantage of this half-machine, half-summoning skill creation was that it didn't require the caster to spend time and energy to build it like pure machine creation, such as a motorcycle just now. It could be immediately summoned by taking out the consumables mentioned in the skill description. Once the Cybertan stood still, Snow immediately gave the order to dig a hole, and Snow himself began to take out various materials from his bag. The two of them worked in sync, and their efficiency was very high. Not long after, the tall Cybertron warrior dug a deep vertical pit that was similar to a well. Snow also used synthesis, universal parts, and synthesis, special parts, to prepare some basic materials. Then, Snow activated the Armor Transformation skill. Name, Armor Transformation, Skill Card Attribute. Active, permanent skill type, Machine Effect. Allows you to undergo a cool armor transformation that lasts for 20 seconds. Cooldown time, 2 hours. Consumption, 200 stamina points. A pile of metal or machine specialization creations that weigh no less than your own body weight learning requirement. General Mastery A, Machine Mastery Serene mark. After transformation, your strength, speed, and endurance will increase or decrease according to the materials used for your transformation. The duration of the transformation is theoretically unlimited, unless you take off your armor voluntarily or release any transformation skills again. Please note, this is not the kind of cartoon that uses a repeated scene for a season. Your transformation process can be interrupted by any external force other than yourself. After the skill was activated, background music started to play from somewhere. Then, Snow levitated on the spot, waiting for the pieces of armor parts that changed their shapes in the white light to cover his body one by one. During this process, every time a part landed on his body, there would be a ping sound effect. Snow's body would also involuntarily change his posture to match this transformation. The 6 teammates who were watching the battle from the spectator space, the rectangular spectator container, would focus on the team members. When the players left the initial battle area, the container would quickly teleport to the sky above them or to other suitable spectator positions. At the same time, the situation of the enemy players would be displayed on a small split screen on one of the walls of the container. We're already numb to this. After all, they had played with Snow for a month, so they were already used to this embarrassing transformation. However, the members of the enemy team were shocked. The 6 friends from a super monster team watched Snow complete a transformation scene that was commonly seen in cartoons from the 1980s and 1990s on the split screen in the spectator space. From his sound effects to the movements, it was extremely awkward. The weirdest thing was, after the transformation, Snow still had no intention of returning to the battle. Instead, he continued to construct in this transformed state. The transformation was just a preparatory work. In order to be able to work underground, he made himself this armor. After he was done, he activated the construction skill, Fantasy Machinery, and started to build the missile silo. Similar to the construction skill, King of the Mountain Road, the special effect of this skill was not very overpowered or weak. However, its degree of freedom and potential were very high. To put it bluntly, the user's wisdom determined the upper limit of its performance. Snow was obviously a user with a lot of imagination. His battle tactics were not only unexpected, but they were also effective. In the transformed state, he only spent 5 or 6 minutes to build the basic facilities needed for the launch. Then he activated the stronger construction skill, sub-deity machinery, and started to build the missile. At the same time, Lei Duong was still sitting in the ring. Lei Duong was also puzzled. He had been waiting for 20 minutes, but there was no movement around him. There were no signs that his opponent would come back. Logically speaking, after such a long time, his opponent should have been judged as AF King and started to receive all kinds of sanctions. However, his opponent was a member of the underworld frontline after all. Lady Wang's heart was still uneasy. After thinking about it, he decided to leave. Lei Duong was not stupid. He would not chase in the direction that his opponent had escaped in. He already knew that his opponent was a player who specialized in machinery. He did not want to step on explosive halfway and suddenly die. Therefore, he chose a roundabout route and wanted to take a detour in that direction. In all fairness, there was no problem with his response. At least from his point of view, it was considered thorough. Just like that, Lei Duong used a jogging state that did not consume any stamina and carefully took a detour in the direction that Snow had escaped in. However, with this speed, there was no doubt that he would not be able to get rid of Snow's spider beacon. After another 10 minutes or so, Lei Duong had already run about 2 kilometers. However, because he was running in a roundabout way and not in a straight line towards Snow, the distance between the two of them had only shortened by about 1 kilometer. Just as Lei Duong was thinking about whether he should increase his speed slightly, he suddenly saw something. Under the bright and beautiful sky, in a wilderness where the scenery was monotonous, a black suddenly appeared in midair, and it was getting bigger and bigger. It was hard not to notice it, even if he did not want to. When Lei Duong first saw that thing, he felt that something was wrong. Therefore, he quickly stopped and raised the weapon in his hand, ready to block it. Could it be a super long-range hidden weapon? As the black dot gradually approached, his expression also slowly changed. Wait. A few seconds later, Lei Duong could not help but mumble to himself, "How big is this thing?" Not long after, the black dot became a black pillar, and the details of its appearance became clearer. It can't be. After seeing the flying object clearly, Lei Duong's back was hunched, and his neck was slightly stretched forward. His face had an expression as if he had just swallowed a mouthful of Chinese gold thread. He muttered, "This doesn't make sense. It must be an illusion." This self-deceiving thought did not last long, because the missile that Snow shot overlanded a few seconds later. A missile was not a bow and arrow. It did not need to, and was very difficult to, hit the target. It only needed to ensure that the target was within its killing range when it exploded, and Lei Duong was undoubtedly within the killing range of the missile at this moment. His real-time coordinates, movement route, movement speed were all under Snow's surveillance. By calculating these data together with the speed of the missile, it was easy to choose a suitable shooting range. And when the missile neared the area where Lei Duong was, those spider beacons could be used to guide the missile on the ground, as much as possible to lead the missile to the target's side to maximize its power. In other words, even if Lei Duong immediately realized that the black dot in the sky was a missile and tried to escape, with his speed, he would not be able to escape this attack. Boom! There was an explosion. Construct, deity machine, was an A-grade skill that required a large amount of normal materials and a small number of special materials to activate. Factoring in the time required for construction, the additional abilities of the user, and other variables, the upper limit of this skill was very scary. Even if the one standing here today was the real Lei Duong, the first monster in the Audiobook series to be set as especially strong, he would be killed in one shot, let alone a player with more than 70 hidden points. Thus, Underworld Frontline's first round of S3's Vanguard battle ended with the enemy team members being vaporized along with the soil within a radius of a few hundred meters before they could even make a single move. Chapter 1461. Between the battle between the Vanguard and the Backbone. the players would have 5 minutes to rest. During this time, the two players who had just finished the first match would be teleported back to their team's observation space. At the same time, the system would repair and clean up the battlefield to return it to the state it was before the battle. Even though the members of Super Monster Team were mentally prepared to lose the first match, they did not expect to be defeated by the method of missile sniping. It could be said that Snow's strategy had refreshed the opponent's understanding of this game. Of course, it had once again dealt a heavy blow to their fighting spirit. In this kind of atmosphere, very soon, the second match of the first round, the 2v2 backbone battle began. Following the system announcement, Wang Tanji and Gu Xiaoling were both teleported into the battlefield and stood in the ring. On the other side, Super Monster Team sent out their captain, Jaden, and their team member, Beemenstein. The match will start in 30 seconds, the system announced. Just as the system announced that, Xiao Tan and Xiao Ling both turned around and ran. Again, Jaden, who saw this, almost blurted out, "Don't panic, Captain." Beemenstein was the strategist of the enemy team. He was relatively calm and then reminded him, "Didn't we watch the S2 video together? Wang Tanji is an assassin player, and Laughing Soul is a sniper. It is normal for them to stay away from each other. They are not there to create missiles." Jaden thought about it and said, "What gave you the idea that, as long as the opponent is not there to create missiles, there is nothing to panic about?" Beemenstein heard that and was also startled. Then, the two of them looked at each other and shouted in unison, "Dodge." When they shouted that, it was less than 10 seconds before the barrier disappeared, and Xiao Tan and Xiao Ling had already disappeared. Jaden and Beemenstein used this last bit of preparation time to desperately run away from their opponents and look for something that could be used as cover. Fortunately, the terrain of this wasteland was slightly undulating, and there were many small wavy hills protruding from the ground. Both Jaden and Beemenstein were LV50 players. Not counting their stamina, their maximum running speed was much faster than ordinary people. 10 seconds was enough for them to run more than 100 meters and find a place to hide. 3, 2, 1, fight! The two of them had just arrived at the back of a small hill when the match officially began. Phew! Beemenstein, who had his back against the mountain, let out a long sigh. All right, now that we know that the other party has sent out a scouting and sniper team, let's discuss it first. Bang! The last word of his first sentence was interrupted by the sound of a gunshot. A bullet arrived a moment earlier than the sound. How is possible? Beemenstein lowered his head slowly and looked at his abdomen. Just as the gunshot entered his ears, a flower of blood suddenly bloomed on his stomach. If this was in reality, his intestines and feces would have burst out and splattered all over the ground. Fortunately, this was a game, and he was a player. The system limited the extent to which the player's body was exposed when they were injured. The most typical example was that some parts of the female player's clothes would never be destroyed or fall off. Therefore, the things that burst out of Beemenstein's stomach were harmonized into a blurry mess of blood. "Oh no, run!" Jaden's reaction was quick. He immediately caught a glimpse of the hole in the mountain behind Beemenstein and deduced what his opponent had done. Bunkers won't work on them. We have to get out of the range of their weapons. At the same time, about 700 meters away, on a steep slope in the middle of a small hill, Xiao Ling had already set up her sniper rifle with a stand. She was lying comfortably on the ground and aiming steadily. Xiao Tan knelt beside her with one knee on the ground. He used his eagle vision to stare at the opponent's position as he muttered, "I hit Beemenstein's abdomen. The damage should be quite severe, but he hasn't lost his ability to move. It seems that he can jog after some simple treatment. Now, he and Jaden are starting to move further away." "Ah, I saw it." 2 seconds later, Xiao Ling replied in an unhurried manner. As the two opponents had run out of the range of the hill, Xiao Ling could see them directly through the scope. As she spoke, she adjusted the muzzle in her hand slightly. Her sniping posture was stable and precise, just like a sophisticated instrument. Her hands, eyes, and heart worked together seamlessly. Bang! A few seconds later, she fired the second bullet. This time, the target was farther away and was moving. The difficulty of hitting the target had undoubtedly increased. But as soon as the gunshot rang out, Bemonston, who was running away, screamed and staggered to the ground. This time, he was shot in the leg. There was a bloody hole the size of a fist in his right thigh. The wound was badly mutilated. Damn it, we're already running, and we're so far away. But she can still, Jaden said as he prepared to carry his teammate on his back. No, no. Unexpectedly, Bemonston pushed Jaden away. She hit my leg on purpose so that you can carry me on your back. This way, for her, the two targets will become one target, and her movement speed will be slower. She can kill two birds with one stone with the next shot. As Bemonston spoke, he did not forget to crawl on the ground, away from Jaden. Quick, you run first. There's still a chance if you escape beyond their detection range. I can't escape in my current state. It's better to find a way to buy you some time. It was necessary to clarify that Xiaoling's first shot was just a test shot. There were 3 reasons for this. First, when she fired the shot, she could not see the enemy. She relied entirely on Xiao Tan's description to locate the target. Second, when she fired the first shot, she could not accurately grasp the influence of the wind. Third, even if she used a specialized penetrating bullet, there was still a certain chance that the bullet would deviate when it passed through an irregular-shaped bunker. To sum up, for safety reasons, Xiaoling's shot was on the lower side. After all, it was easier to hit the torso than the head. However, the second shot was different. This time, Xiaoling could see the target, and the target was already injured. As long as she fired another shot at the torso, which was the easiest to hit, Bemonston would most likely die on the spot. However, she shot at the opponent's leg. Of course, there was another reason for this move. Of course, Bemonston, who was at the level of an advisor, did not think that much. He was just deducing based on common sense. If the opponent's marksmanship was so good that she could hit the leg of a moving target, she must be able to hit the torso, which was easier to hit. Then, why didn't the opponent directly hit the torso to take his life? There must be a conspiracy. Okay, after Jaden received Bemonston's instructions, he quickly responded and ran out without looking back. His speed was even faster than before. Even though we could often see in movies or literature that 2 or more people would fight in similar situations. Hurry up and leave. No, I can't leave you behind. Do you want me to die in vain? But, if you don't leave now, I'll die in front of you. This kind of touching dialogue would make people anxious, but Jaden and Bemonston did not intend to do this. Their thinking was very clear. When your teammates are fighting for you with their lives on the line, you better stop talking nonsense and act quickly. That's the right thing to do. Not bad. Xiaoling, who was holding a gun, saw what was happening on the other side through the scope. Although she could not hear the conversation between the opponents, she could roughly guess the content. It seems that we can't rely on sniping to solve this problem. Her deduction was correct. Currently, the distance between Jaden and them was increasing at an extremely fast speed. The further the distance, the lower the lethality and accuracy of the bullet. If the next shot was to chase after Jaden, even if it hit, it wouldn't have much of an impact on him. Honey, a second later, Xiaoling called out to Xiao Tan. Yes, Xiao Tan replied. Go after him, Xiaoling said again. Okay. Xiao Tan nodded. Who should I go after? The one who is running, of course, Xiaoling said. Understood. After Xiao Tan confirmed the target, he disappeared in a flash. Bang! The moment he rushed out, Xiaoling's cool-down time for shooting also ended. She immediately aimed at Bemonston, who was lying on the ground, and fired the third shot. However, this spear was blocked by his opponent. A blue protective shield with ripples on its surface suddenly appeared just as the bullet was about to hit Bemonston. It blocked the penetrating bullet. This skill was Bemonston's title ability, Ripple Protective Shield. After the skill was activated, no matter what attack Bemonston received in the next 10 seconds, the protective shield would automatically appear around him to block it. As a defensive skill, this skill was quite powerful. Its weakness was that, The duration was too short. If this skill could last for 10 minutes, Bemonston would have activated the skill long ago. But 10 seconds, he could only use it at a critical moment when he was about to die. Okay, I did it. Bemonston was treating his wound as he muttered. The first shot was indeed unexpected and impossible to defend against. The second shot showed that, in front of your marksmanship, moving is useless. But when the second shot rang out, your interval between shots was exposed. This gave me the opportunity to calculate in advance and activate the skill to defend against the third shot. He was very fast. As he thought of this, he had already stopped the bleeding and released a summoning skill, Summon Air Elemental. This was just a grade C summoning skill, not very powerful. However, Bemonston did not specialize in summoning. He was a player who was good at sorcery. The reason he summoned this elemental was to complement his sorcery skill, Psychic Metamorphosis. With this skill, Bemonston could absorb the summoned creature as if it was a buff, greatly increasing his maximum health, instantly recovering 50% of his life points, and gaining part of the summoned creature's ability. After transforming into this form, I should be able to fight them for a while. When Bemonston's metamorphosis was completed, a gray, swirling little whirlwind wrapped around his limbs and torso like armor. Whoosh! Just when Bemonston was slightly distracted by the transformation, suddenly, an arrow pierced through the wind and hit his temple. Bemonston reacted quickly. He raised his hand and grabbed the arrow, stopping it in its tracks. What the hell? Although Bemonston blocked the attack, he was still in shock. He turned his head abruptly and looked in the direction where the arrow came from, but he did not even see a shadow. This was because Xiao Tan, who released the arrow, ran faster than the arrow. Moreover, Xiao Tan did not deliberately attack Bemonston. When he passed by, he saw that the shooting range was suitable, so he casually shot an arrow and continued to chase after Jaden. On the other hand, after Xiao Ling saw the change in Bemonston, she decisively deactivated her sniping mode. She took out a few other guns from her inventory and activated Assembly Magic. Chapter 1462. Under the effect of the Assembly Magic, Xiaoling's firearms were instantly disassembled and reassembled into a single entity. The appearance of this thing, well, it looked like an exaggerated engine that only appeared in cartoons. It had a punk feel to it, and at the end of the engine was a part that looked like a cannon barrel. It was as if it was trying to show that it was actually a weapon. Instead of calling it an assembly gun, it was more like a super heavy and super complicated hand cannon. When a player held it in his hand, it looked like a giant chainsaw from afar. Phew! After Xiao Ling assembled the hand cannon, she took a deep breath and bent down to pick it up. After all, she was not a fighter, and her strength was slightly lacking. It was impossible for her to pick up such a huge object so easily. While she was doing all this, Bemonston did not stay idle. When he saw that the interval between shots that he had calculated was almost up, but the fourth shot was still not coming, he knew that his opponent had changed their attack method after seeing his psychic mutation form. Hence, Bemonston made his move. He immediately ran in a different direction from Jaden and sped up. Bemonston's train of thought was this: no matter what weapon his opponent used, the further he ran, the lower the damage and accuracy of the gun would be. That was for sure. Besides, with the air elemental, his maximum HP and physical defense had increased tremendously. Even if he was hit by a sniper rifle that was more powerful than the penetrating bullet from before, he was confident that he would not be killed in one shot. If everything went well, he might be able to cover Jaden's escape while he escaped from the enemy's shooting range in another direction, dragging the battle into a protracted battle. Of course, that was just his idea. Xiaoling did not care about that. In this world, there was something called a cannon that had a much longer range than a gun. The cannon's projectile moved in a parabola. Even if you ran out of the enemy's line of sight, the cannon would still hit you. Boom! About 10 seconds after Bemonston started to run, the cannon roared. The fact that Xiao Ling took so long to aim at him meant that the distance between them was indeed quite far. It also meant that Bemonstan's movement speed was not slow. However, since Xiao Ling fired the cannon, it meant that she was confident in her actions. A blazing white energy bullet flew out from the cannon and pierced through the sky, leaving a trail of heat in the air as it headed straight for the target. After the mutation, Bemonstan's senses had become much sharper. That was why he could catch Xiao Tan's arrow. As he ran, he quickly felt the energy approaching him from behind. At that moment, he did not even need to look back to confirm. He stepped sideways and suddenly flashed more than 5 meters to his left. Bemonstan's response was indeed brilliant. In any case, it would take a few seconds for the cannon to fly over. Even the best gunner, who had calculated the time to fire, would aim at the target that was moving in a straight line at a constant speed a few seconds ago. As long as the target changed direction before the cannon flew out and landed, it would be meaningless no matter how accurate the gunner's aim was. However, Bemondston never thought that the real function of the energy bullet was buzz. Just when the cannon was about 30 meters away from the ground, with a buzz, the blazing white light suddenly exploded and turned into Xiao Ling what? Bemondston, who was retreating while waiting for the cannon to land, turned his head to look at the sky. When he saw the figure of his opponent, he was obviously shocked. A few seconds later, Bemondston realized that his opponent had not fired a destruction bullet, but a teleportation bullet. This method of allowing the player to teleport to the location of the cannon was naturally a skill. However, because this was an ability that Xiao Ling had only mastered in the past month, it was impossible to know that she had such a skill just by looking at the S2 video. Xiao Ling, who suddenly appeared in midair, looked at the shocked expression on her opponent's face and knew that her surprise attack was half successful. She could not help but smile. The next second, she had activated assembly magic again and disassembled the hand cannon into 4 or 5 guns. Then, she grabbed 2 of them and raised her hand to shoot. Bang, 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 tut, 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 tut. 2 different gunshots rang out at the same time. Before the shells fell to the ground, Bemondston, who was still moving, had been shot more than 10 times, and each of them was a special bullet with a high price. But, after all, Bemondston was a player with 70 to 80 hidden points and a level close to 60. Moreover, he had transformed to strengthen his defense. Therefore, Xiao Ling's tactic, which was able to suppress the blade during the S2 game, was no longer able to kill Bemondston. He's pretty good at taking a beating, Xiao Ling thought to herself. At this time, she had not yet landed. Due to inertia, she and the guns that she had disassembled were now moving along the flight path of the previous teleportation bullet, roughly falling diagonally. Seeing that the mid-range shooting was not effective, Xiao Ling changed her tactic at the last minute in the air. Without hesitation, she threw away the submachine gun and pistol in her hand and accurately grabbed the other 2 guns that had fallen to the ground beside her. Then, she fired an explosive shot diagonally above herself. The purpose of using this skill was, of course, not to hit the birds in the sky, but to use the reaction force of this skill to change the trajectory of her fall and carry out an explosive push. Sure enough, the sound of gunshots, shadows, and dazzling flames pushed Xiao Ling, who was in midair, toward Bemondston. What the hell is she doing? Bemondston was a little dissatisfied when he saw this. How dare marksmanship expert challenge me to a melee fight? Don't think that I'll go easy on you just because you're a beauty. With that thought in mind, he got into a stance and prepared to fight back. Unexpectedly, Xiao Ling's speed was much faster than he had expected. Her small figure was as fast as a bullet, and she arrived in front of him in the blink of an eye. Before Bemondston could complete his defensive stance, she had already launched a gunfighting 14 styles jump at him. When Bemondston's face was stepped on by Xiao Ling, and he fell to the ground with his limbs in the air, this sentence flashed in his mind. Speaking of which, I'm not a player who specializes in fighting. I just cast a sorcery transformation skill, and I got a little carried away. Bang, bang, bang. Before he could finish lamenting, Xiao Ling had already stepped on his head and fired a few shots at his body with the 2 different types of shotguns in her hands. The bullets were supposed to scatter, but at this distance, they hit Monstan's stomach without missing a single one. About 2 seconds later, Jaden, who was on the other side, received the system notification that his teammate had died. Damn it, is it still not enough? When he turned around to run, Jaden thought that Monstan would be killed in an instant. To his surprise, after running for a while, he still did not receive the notification of his teammate's death. This gave him a glimmer of hope. Unfortunately, in less than a minute, he finally received the notification that his teammate had been killed. Whoosh! Just when Jaden was frustrated by the notification, he suddenly heard the sound of something rushing through the air behind him. If Xiao Ling's movement was like an explosive bullet, then Xiao Tan's movement was like a soundless arrow. Moreover, it was the kind of arrow that never lost its momentum. When Jaden heard the sound, he knew that someone had attacked him from behind. He immediately turned around and launched a counterattack. Judging from Jaden's ID, it was obvious that he was an experienced beta tester. As the leader of a team, there was no doubt about his strength. A character with S-level combat mastery and A-level sorcery mastery was definitely not weak in close-range combat. Besides, just like Xiao Tan's Altair's Touch, Jaden's main weapon was a composite weapon that was equipped on his hands. However, Jaden did not use the assassin's hidden sword or hidden arrow. Instead, he used a pair of asymmetrical gloves called Lakesala's Grip. Under normal circumstances, the left hand of this equipment was a black fingerless glove that was slightly bigger than a normal glove. The right hand was more like a black armguard that covered the elbow. Once he entered combat mode, the left hand would remain the same, but the right hand would suddenly swell together with the arm. When that happened, his right forearm would become as thick as Hulk's arm. The black armor on the outside would also swell, and the fist at the front would turn into a big red iron fist. Right now, Jaden was using his thickened right hand to block Xiao Tan's attack. In the end, there was a clang sound. As sparks flew, the two of them passed by each other. A second later, Xiao Tan appeared about 10 meters away from Jaden and confronted him. As expected of a team leader, Xiao Tan lowered his head and looked at his wrist. He moved it a few times and said, "My entire hand is numb from the shock." "Well said." Jaden glanced at the white mark on his vambrace and said, "For an assassin, your attack power is not bad. You are indeed worthy of being a former hell." Whoosh! Before he could finish, Xiao Tan raised his hand and threw a hidden arrow at him. Hey! Jaden was different from Monstan. Even without any enhancement, he could still block this kind of attack. "Why are you in such a hurry? I haven't finished talking." As he spoke, he calmly caught the flying hidden arrow with his left hand and broke it in half. "This kind of battle, there's no need to drag it out for too long," Xiao Tan replied. "According to my observation, it's going to be done in less than 3 seconds. Huh? Jaden's expression changed slightly. "What are you talking about? What did you observe? And what are you going to do in less than 3 seconds? My life. There's a limit to looking down on others. With my close combat ability, even if your team leader, Feng Bujue, is here, it's impossible for him to—" His words were cut off again. The sound of blood spurting out from his throat was very pleasant to the ear, like the sound of wind blowing through wheat. At this moment, Jaden looked forward with a blank face. He did not know when. Xiao Tan was no longer in his sight. What made him even more frightened was that he did not even know when his throat was pierced. The attack from behind you tested your reaction speed and defensive ability. At this time, Xiao Tan's voice slowly sounded from behind Jaden. The hidden arrow shot from the front was to test if you have the kind of automatic reaction defense. He paused. "This is observation." As he spoke, Jaden quickly used his left hand to cover his throat and deactivated the transformation of his right hand. He frantically reached into his inventory to take something out. And the conclusion of this observation is... Xiao Tan ignored him and continued calmly. "If I fight you with normal speed, I will definitely not be able to win quickly. Not only will I not be able to win quickly, considering that you're most likely a player who specializes in fighting continuous close combat with you will also bring a certain amount of risk. Fortunately, you don't seem to have the kind of defensive skill or equipment that can passively take effect, because even if you see with your own eyes that it's just an ordinary arrow flying towards you, you still have to intercept it with your own hands. After knowing this, I have an 80% confidence that I can kill you instantly. As Xiao Tan was saying this, Jaden had already treated his wound urgently. He forced himself to stand up and summoned the giant fist on his right arm again. It looked like he was going to fight to the death. At that moment, he really couldn't speak anymore. His left hand was still covering his throat. Even though it is a little cruel to say this. Xiaotan looked at his opponent and pursed his lips. But if you insist on prolonging your life, at most, you will only force me to repeat what happened in those 3 seconds. Before he could finish, from Jaden's perspective, his opponent's figure disappeared from his sight again. The most despairing thing was, in the same second, the side of Jaden's neck, the part that he didn't cover with his hand, had another hole made by the hidden sword. This is too ridiculous. That was Jaden's last thought before he turned into white light. It was not just him. Even the research team from the gaming studio was confused when they watched the video after the match. From a third party's perspective, they could only see Xiao Tan's sudden disappearance and reappearance. No matter how many times they slowed down the video, they couldn't see the moment when he stabbed Jaden. Of course, the people from Underworld Frontline knew very well that Xiao Tan had used his title skill, Time Flash, to defeat his opponent. Other than the people from Underworld Frontline, only a small number of people saw what Wang Tanji had done in the battle with Jaden. Those who saw the truth naturally came to the conclusion that one of the skills or equipment on Xiao Tan could utilize one of the 4 most powerful powers in Thriller Paradise, the power of time. But that was not the end of the story. Let's focus on the present. When Jaden was killed, the second match of the first round of S3, the Battle of the Backbone, came to an end. Although Jaden and Baymonstein's performance was commendable, the difference in strength between the two sides was still a little too big. In the end, Underworld Frontline won again with 0 casualties, easily gaining a 2 o'clock lead. They brought the match to the match point during the participation match. Chapter 1463. After winning the first 2 matches, the players from Underworld Frontline were no longer under any pressure. If nothing unexpected happened, they would advance from the first round with a score of 3-0 after this general battle was over. On the other hand, the players from Super Monster Team were all nervous. They were not nervous because they were worried that they would lose the next match. They were worried that Su Huaishang would not enter the arena until they lost the next match. Today, the reason why Super Monster Team did not forfeit the match was because they were all fans of Su Huaishang. Even though they weren't fanatical fans like Su Huaishang's personal bodyguards, they were still qualified to be called her die-hard fans. They wouldn't want to miss the chance to fight against their idol in the tournament for the best S3. Indeed, from the first 2 matches, the gap in strength between them and Su Huaishang made the 7 members of Super Monster Team feel hopeless. However, that was to be expected. They were already prepared to be defeated in all 3 matches. However, if they lost without even seeing Su Huaishang's shadow, it would be hard for them to accept it. For the sake of fairness, Team Super Monster even decided to use rock, paper, scissors to determine their lineup before the match. This way, no matter who Su Huaishang ended up as, no one would complain. After all, it all depended on luck. However, the first 2 matches were already over. In the first match, when Leda Wang entered the arena, he saw that his opponent was Snow. His enthusiasm for the match was instantly extinguished. Under the same circumstances, if it was Su Huaishang who was fighting with him, even if Su Huaishang rode a rocket into the sky, Leda Wang would not hesitate to chase after her. But if it was Snow, forget it. Then, in the second match, Jaden and Baymonstein entered the arena. They realized that Underworld Frontline did not send out Su Huaishang. Instead, they sent out a couple. They were really, how many worries can a gentleman have? They were like 2 single dogs. No matter what, they fought with all their might and were quickly defeated. In the blink of an eye, it was time for the match. According to the lineup, Super Monster Team sent out a player who specialized in scouting, Barton. Everyone knew that this would be the last match of the night. Therefore, for Super Monster Team, this was their last chance to see Su Huaishang. My name is Lin. Forget it. Names don't matter. I'm just a supporting character, a cameo. I, who have an ordinary mind and appearance, am destined to live an ordinary life and die an ordinary death. This is my life. However, because of a game of rock, paper, scissors, my world became sparkling. To have a one-on-one duel with Su Huaishang in S3 with this memory, I can live the rest of my life peacefully. This was what Bardan thought when he saw Su Huaishang standing on the other side of the barrier. Since the preparation time was only 30 seconds, by the time he was done with his mental activity, the system was about to start the countdown. As for Su Huaishang, she was very calm in the face of the infatuated fan. After all, it was a daily occurrence for her to be stared at like this as one of the best fighters in the game. Su Huaishang did not need to retreat at the start of the match. She just stood where she was and waited for the barrier to disappear. 5, 4, 3. Just as the system counted down at 3, suddenly Ruoyu, who was in the audience, looked at the battlefield and said 3 words, "It's over." When she said that, even Feng Bujue did not understand. Why would Ruoyu use such a confident tone and foretell that her opponent would be killed before the match even started? But 3 seconds later, when the barrier disappeared with the system's fight, things happened as Ruoyu predicted. At that moment, on the stage, Su Huaishang's position suddenly changed. Her movements were fast, agile, light, and hurried, while everyone's eyes were still fixed on the place where she was originally standing and looking at her afterimage. She had already moved to another place and stood silently. The wind blew. Su Huaishang's clothes fluttered in the wind. Her hair also fluttered in the wind. Her pair of jade-like hands quickly moved away from the hilt of the sword. This was not something to be surprised about. What was puzzling was not when her hand left the saber, but when her hand gripped the saber. Was it when the system counted down? Was it when the barrier disappeared? Or was it when she was moving? At least in the Super Monster Team, no one could see it with their dynamic vision. Of course, this answer was not important. The scariest thing was, since she had let go of the sword, it meant that she had already attacked earlier. Puff! Hiss! 1 second later, 2 strange sounds were heard. Baltan, who was still standing on the spot, had no idea what was going on. Suddenly, he felt the scenery in his field of vision changing. Finally, it stopped at a horizontal angle. In his eyes, half of it was the floor and the other half was the sky. Then, from the corner of his eye, he saw a headless corpse that was dressed exactly like him. The corpse slowly fell from a standing position. It was not until later when he watched the recording that Baltan realized that the legendary sword skill that was so fast that the opponent could not feel existed. And he had personally experienced it in the game. At the same time, in the spectator space, Feng Bujue immediately turned to Ruoyu and asked, "Interesting, how did you know this would happen?" "Naturally, I could tell," Ruoyu replied calmly. Could it be that you have mastered the ability to see the future a few seconds in the future?" Brother Ju asked again. Ruoyu shook her head. "I don't have that kind of ability. I only made that judgment after I saw her move." "Oh," Brother Ju asked curiously. "Did she use some kind of skill before the barrier disappeared? How come I didn't see it? There was no change in her data or energy." "It's not a skill, it's a technique," Ruoyu continued. At that time, she looked like she was just standing, but in fact, she had already entered a special state of exhaustion. It's different from the general sense of relaxing the body. This is a superb technique that requires a lot of training. After mastering it, the next move she performs in the state of exhaustion will be imbued with astonishing explosive power. Just now, when she was waiting, it was a good opportunity to use this technique. Considering that her opponent did not show any signs of moving when there were only 3 seconds left, and he was still standing within the range of the ring, I was certain that once the barrier disappeared, he would be killed in an instant. Hearing this, everyone in Underworld Frontline, including Fong Bujue, had a deep understanding of the strength of the two heroines in the team. To be honest, even Brother Ju would be in danger if he was up against this technique that even the data perspective could not prevent. I still have something I don't understand. At this time, Su Huaishang spoke thoughtfully. She was teleported back to the spectator space when Ruo Yu was in the middle of her speech. Although she did not hear Brother Ju's question, she had a rough idea of what was going on. Hey, you're the person in question, aren't you? Ruo Yu narrowed her eyes and put on a Fong Bujue face. Well, the onlooker can't see clearly. Su Huaishang looked at Ruo Yu's expression and smiled knowingly. I just want to ask, how did you know that my attack would be an instantaneous kill? If the opponent also has an S-level fighting mastery and is proficient in speed, he would still have a chance to avoid being hit in the vitals, right? Roy, you thought for a while this. I don't know. I just saw him standing there, and I knew that he would not be able to dodge it. Oh, I know why. Fong Bujue said. I don't even know why. How do you know? Ruo Yu asked curiously. Well, the onlooker can't see clearly. Fong Bujue mimicked Su Huaishang's tone and smiled at Ruo Yu. But it's a little complicated to explain. I'll explain it to everyone when we return to the conference room. Brother Ju did know about this. Before S2, he had noticed that Ruo Yu had a power that was similar to the demon's Eye of Death. It was not a soul's eye, it was not a skill. It was a talent of hers. It was similar to Brother Ju's truth's fallacy. It could be used in the real world as well. Now, Ruo Yu's power was much stronger than before. She could even see through things that even Brother Ju could not. For example, when Su Huaishang used the exhaustion skill earlier, only Ruo Yu could see through it. The match has ended. 5 minutes after Su Huaishang completed the instantaneous kill, the system announcement came. Final score, 3-0 inch winner. Underworld Frontline. Teleportation will begin in 30 seconds. Just like that, Underworld Frontline cleared the first round of Thriller Paradise's tournament for the best without any surprises or danger. The score was a clean sweep, and there were no casualties. Other than the first round, the other 2 rounds, the mid-tier battle was finished in 3 minutes, and the general battle was an instantaneous kill, setting the record for the fastest kill in the first round. With such an impressive result, theoretically speaking, in less than 2 hours, there would have been news articles written by various media outlets. They would have added headlines like defending champion steamrolls through to the next round to grab the headlines. However, that did not happen, because compared to this battle where the defending champion was able to steamroll the casual players, there was a more interesting match in the first round that was not over yet. Even the members of Underworld Frontline were interested in the result of that match. At this point, perhaps some of them had already guessed who the 2 sides of that match were. That's right, it was Regulation and Brahmin. Whether it was Fate or Fate, these 2 teams were matched against each other in the first round of S3. Needless to say, this was going to be an epic battle. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.